Some discoveries just don't fit. Ancient ruins that look too advanced, tools trapped in stone, and artifacts that whisper of worlds long forgotten. They were found, documented, and then quietly forgotten. But tonight, we're bringing them back from lost cities buried in sand to statues that shouldn't exist at all. If you love sinking into ancient mysteries, they say good luck follows those who like and subscribe before the story begins. Because what you're about to hear might not change history, but it might change how you see it. The stone mushrooms of Cappadocia. Nature or ritual? In the heart of central Turkey lies a landscape that looks as if it were dreamed, not made. Valleys carved from soft volcanic tuff stretch for miles, dotted with towering cones of stone, some narrow, some wide, many crowned with flat caps that balance impossibly atop their stems. To the traveler, they look like giant mushrooms, frozen mid-growth in the pale dust of Cappadocia. Scientists call them fairy chimneys, the product of wind and rain slowly sculpting the land. Yet for thousands of years, people have called them something else: homes, sanctuaries, temples. Every ridge and hollow carries the mark of human hands that refuse to see nature as random. The story begins 6 million years ago, when ancient volcanoes blanketed this region in ash. Over time, the ash hardened into tuff, a rock soft enough to carve yet strong enough to stand. Then came rain, frost, and wind, chiseling the surface into the strange forest of cones we see today. To geology, it is erosion. To ancient eyes, it was a miracle. Long before recorded history, the first settlers here discovered that the rock could be hollowed out. They carved shelters, rooms, tunnels, whole villages beneath the open sky. Some dwellings sank deep into the earth, where light was scarce and sound moved like whispers through the walls. Firelight flickered against ceilings shaped like domes, smoke escaping through tiny vents. When later generations arrived, they found a landscape already marked by ancestors they could no longer name. Hittites, Phrygians, Persians, Romans all left their traces in the stone. But the oldest chambers are impossible to date. There are no inscriptions, no relics of iron or pottery, only the marks of tools long eroded by dust. It is here that the question rises. Were these formations only natural, or were some deliberately shaped? Beneath certain mushroom towers, the bases are perfectly smoothed, as though someone had traced the edge with purpose. In others, the caps are too symmetrical, the balance too deliberate. Could ancient builders have refined what nature began? Local legends say that giants once walked Cappadocia and turned to stone when the sun rose. Another tale speaks of a race of wise beings who lived underground to escape the flood that destroyed the world above. In those stories, the stone mushrooms were the chimneys of their hidden homes, the last breath of a forgotten civilization reaching for light. When early Christian monks came to this land, they felt that same pull toward concealment. They carved entire monasteries inside the pillars, their walls painted with saints and angels, their hymns echoing where the wind once howled. The rock preserved their faith through centuries of invasion and silence. Even now, faint pigments of red and gold linger beneath layers of dust, proof of devotion carved into stone. Modern explorers descending into the deeper chambers discovered vast networks, cities capable of sheltering tens of thousands. Derinkuyu, Kaymakli, Uzkonak, names that sound like echoes of the past. Ventilation shafts plunge nearly 100 meters, carved with precision that suggests planning far beyond survival. Some shafts align with celestial points, others mirror the path of underground water. Coincidence, or memory of an ancient science? Archaeologists insist that erosion shaped the towers and that people merely adapted them. Yet there are details that complicate that view. Certain caps are made of harder basalt, perfectly fitted atop softer tuff, almost as if someone placed them intentionally to protect the pillars beneath. And deep within some formations, the walls resonate with sound, a low hum that changes pitch when the sun crosses midday. Was it ritual? Was it architecture tuned to the earth itself? Cappadocia has always blurred the line between nature and design. The entire region feels alive, shifting in color as the light moves. Roses at dawn, ochre by noon, violet by twilight. Tourists see beauty. Ancient pilgrims saw presence. Many believed the land was sacred because it breathed. Imagine an ancient ceremony here. Torches flickering, shadows of the stone mushrooms stretching across the valley, priests chanting in the language of wind, smoke curling upward to meet the stars. The stone becomes both altar and witness. In that moment, nature and ritual are one. Even today, locals speak softly when they walk among the chimneys at night. They say the wind there has voices. Some hear whispers like prayers. Others swear the pillars move when no one is watching. Whether myth or memory, those stories keep the mystery alive. Science tells us how the shapes were made, but not why they inspire awe. Maybe that is the true message of Cappadocia, that creation does not always need intent to feel sacred. The earth itself can sculpt miracles, and humans, in awe, simply learn to live inside them. Stand at the edge of the valley as dawn rises. The light spills across hundreds of stone towers, each crowned with a shadow that drifts slowly down the slopes. For a moment you cannot tell where nature ends and humanity begins. You only feel the silence, the same silence that has watched over this place for thousands of years. So were the stone mushrooms of Cappadocia born of chance, or shaped by ritual hands? Maybe both. Maybe the builders of this world were not separate from nature but part of its design, guided by forces we no longer understand, and as the sun climbs higher and the valley glows gold, you realize the truth. In Cappadocia, every stone is alive, every shadow remembers, and the question itself, the balance between nature and ritual, is the secret that keeps these ancient towers standing. The megalithic face of Marcahuasi Plateau. High above the clouds of the Andes, on a windswept plateau in Peru, lies a place that feels carved out of another world. The Marcahuasi Plateau, a vast expanse of volcanic stone standing nearly 4,000 meters above sea level, stretches like a frozen sea of rock. Here the air is thin, the silence endless, and the shapes in the cliffs seem to come alive beneath the shifting sun. Among the strange formations that crown this mountain, one stands out above all, a colossal stone face that gazes eternally across the horizon. Some say it is nature's work, others insist it is not. When explorers first reached Marcahuasi in the early 20th century, they were stunned by what they saw. Rocks shaped like animals, figures and faces scattered across the plateau. Some appeared so precise, so deliberate, that coincidence seemed impossible, and at the heart of it all, the so-called monument to humanity, a massive human-like profile rising from the cliffs, staring into eternity. To the eye, it looks unmistakable, a forehead, a nose, lips, and chin, all aligned perfectly with the mountain's edge. From certain angles, it even seems to shift expression, as if alive. The first question asked was the same one whispered today. Was this face carved or revealed? Geologists will tell you the truth is erosion. Centuries of wind and rain shaping volcanic rock into random illusions. But locals see something deeper. They believe the plateau was once a sacred site, where gods or ancient beings shaped the earth as messages to those who came later. Legends say that long before the Inca, a civilization lived here, a people of immense knowledge and power who could mold stone with sound and light. When the world faced destruction, they carved their memory into the mountain itself, so that even if they vanished, their image would remain. The face of Marcahuasi, they say, is the last witness of that forgotten age. Standing on the plateau, you can almost feel it. The wind moves differently here. It doesn't just blow, it hums. The ground seems to breathe. Shadows stretch and contract across the stones, forming shapes that vanish the moment you look away. There are faces everywhere. Lions, condors, warriors, even strange creatures that don't belong to any known age. It's as if the mountain carries an entire gallery of lost history. Archaeologist Daniel Russo, one of the first to study Marcahuasi seriously, believed the plateau held evidence of a prehistoric global civilization, what he called Mazma. He claimed the sculptures weren't natural, but deliberate creations of a people who lived long before the Great Flood. To Russo, these were messages carved by survivors of a cataclysm, warning future generations of cycles that repeat. Creation, destruction, rebirth. He mapped over 100 distinct stone figures, each aligned to celestial markers. Many point toward the sunrise of solstice days, or to constellations once worshipped by ancient Andean cultures. Coincidence, perhaps, or a clue to how ancient builders saw the world as a living map. Skeptics call it pareidolia, the human tendency to see faces where none exist. But Marcahuasi challenges even that. The angles, the alignments, the deliberate proportions of some figures suggest more than chance. The face itself, over 60 feet tall, has features too symmetrical, too intentional, to dismiss easily. And then there are the ruins scattered nearby, strange stone walls, flattened platforms, and stairways leading to nowhere. They speak of human presence long before the Inca Empire. Carbon dating offers little clarity. The rocks themselves are millions of years old, but the question of when they were shaped remains open and haunting. At night, Marcahuasi transforms. Under the silver light of the moon, the plateau glows faintly, the rocks casting long shadows that merge into recognizable forms. Locals say the spirits of the ancients still walk there, that if you sit in silence, you can hear voices carried by the wind. To them, the face is not a monument, but a guardian. It watches over the mountain, keeping the balance between worlds seen and unseen. Spiritual seekers from around the world travel to Marcahuasi even now. They describe it as a place of energy, where time feels slower, the senses sharper. Some report strange lights flickering across the cliffs at night, blue and white flashes with no known source. Others claim compasses spin uselessly, and electronics falter near the central plateau. Could it be magnetic anomalies in the volcanic rock, or something older, something we have yet to understand? Ancient Peruvian myths speak of the amorous, serpent-like beings of light, who emerged from the earth after the flood to guide humanity. Some believe Marcahuasi was one of their sacred meeting places, a point where heaven and earth met. The face, then, was not merely a sculpture, but a symbol, the image of humanity itself, emerging from stone after destruction. Even scientists, standing before it, admit something about the mountain feels intentional. The erosion patterns are unique, as if the rock itself cooperated in its own design. Nature does not often repeat precision like this. Yet here, precision hides in every fold and shadow. Imagine ancient artisans standing on the plateau thousands of years ago. No tools, no scaffolds, only stone and vision. Perhaps they didn't carve in the way we think. Perhaps they guided nature instead, shaping erosion with water, heat, or resonance. Sound could move sand, and if amplified by the right frequencies, maybe it could shape softer rock. It's a theory that borders myth, but then again, so does Marcahuasi itself. Every era that has found this mountain has seen what it wanted to see. For explorers, it's mystery. For locals, it's sacred. For scientists, it's geology. But for those who stand there long enough, who feel the silence press against their skin, Marcahuasi becomes something else entirely. A mirror. The face isn't just in the rock, it's in us, our need to find meaning, to connect to what came before. As the sun sets, the light shifts, and the stone face seems to change expression, serene one moment, stern the next. Its gaze follows the horizon, watching as the stars begin to pierce the sky. You realize you are standing on one of Earth's oldest stages, where nature, time, and humanity have all played their parts. Whether carved by hands or carved by wind, the result is the same, a portrait of endurance. Marcahuasi does not offer answers, it offers reflection. It asks a question older than civilization itself. Did we shape the world, or did the world shape us? And as the night deepens, and the wind sings across the plateau, you begin to understand what Daniel Russo meant when he called this place the memory of humanity. Because here, on this lonely Peruvian mountaintop, where stone becomes face and silence becomes voice, you can almost feel the truth, that someone, once stood here, long before us, and their memory still looks back through the eyes of the mountain. The desert kites of Arabia, ancient hunting machines. Across the endless deserts of Arabia, where the dunes roll like waves of gold, and the horizon melts into heat and silence, there are patterns etched into the earth so vast they can only be seen from the sky. Long lines of stone, converging into sharp points, stretch for hundreds of meters across barren plains. From above, they look like arrows or enormous kites. Wings spread wide against the sand. On the ground, they vanish into dust. These are the desert kites, one of the Middle East's greatest ancient enigmas. Thousands of them lie scattered across Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Syria, and beyond. Some are so perfectly shaped that pilots flying overhead during the early 20th century thought they were airstrips or symbols carved for the gods. But these lines are far older than flight, far older even than recorded civilization. Archaeologists now believe the desert kites were built between 6,000 and 9,000 years ago, long before writing, long before cities. Whoever made them shaped the land itself into a tool. The question is, for what? The first explorers to map them from the air noticed their distinct form, two long, diverging walls built of piled stones, leading to a narrow enclosure at the tip. The walls often ran for hundreds of meters, sometimes kilometers, perfectly straight and aligned with the terrain. In satellite images, they look like the outline of a gigantic funnel. At first, no one understood what they were. Then came the theory. They were ancient hunting machines. The walls, it was said, were designed to guide wild animals, gazelles, oryx, even ostriches, into the enclosure at the end, where hunters waited. The kites were traps on a scale so vast that only communities working together could have built or used them. Imagine it, the dawn breaking over the Arabian desert, hunters stationed along the stone lines, beating drums and shouting, driving herds toward the funnel. The animals, confused by the narrow walls, run faster, straight into the killing ground. In moments, hundreds could be trapped. The hunt wasn't a sport. It was survival, industry, and ritual combined. But even that explanation leaves questions. Many kites are too large, too complex, too perfectly aligned with the stars or topography to be purely functional. Some lead not to enclosures, but to deep pits or circular chambers cut into the rock. Others are found on steep slopes where no animal could easily run. What purpose did those serve? Satellite mapping has revealed more than 6,000 kites across Arabia, forming patterns that sometimes mirror constellations. Some align with migration routes, yes, but others point nowhere known. Could they have served another role? A few researchers propose that after their use as hunting structures faded, these sites became ritual landscapes, places where early herders gathered to honor the spirits of the hunt, or to mark the cycles of the sun. In ancient Arabic myth, the desert was home to jinn, creatures of fire and wind. To the nomads who crossed these lands, the desert was alive, aware. To build something upon it was to speak to it. The stone walls of the kites are crude, only a meter high in most places, but their scale is immense. Some stretch longer than the tallest modern skyscraper is high. The builders had no metal, no machines, yet they moved millions of stones. Why? The effort must have been enormous, suggesting purpose far beyond daily life. In the north of Saudi Arabia, near Alula and Khaybar, new excavations have revealed that the kites sometimes intersect with mustatiles, rectangular stone monuments even older, whose purpose is still unknown. Together they form networks that spread across the land like the circuitry of an ancient world. Some archaeologists now believe Arabia may have been the site of a forgotten innovation, an early form of environmental engineering, where humans reshaped nature on a scale thought impossible for prehistory. And then there's the mystery of timing. Radiocarbon samples from charcoal buried in kite walls show dates stretching back to 8000 BCE, nearly 2000 years before the pyramids. At that time, the Arabian Peninsula wasn't all sand, it was greener, with rivers, grasslands, and herds of wild animals. The people who built the kites lived in a world now lost, swallowed by desert. When the climate changed and the rains vanished, their traps turned to fossils of stone, traces of a civilization that adapted and then disappeared. But legends remember, Bedouin tribes speak of ancient hunters who called down storms to drive the herds. They say the lines of rock were not just traps but boundaries of sacred ground where the spirits of the hunt still linger. When the wind sweeps across them, it carries whispers like breath through a flute, low, rhythmic, haunting. Modern archaeologists walk those same lines today, GPS in hand, tracing paths once marked by firelight and blood. In the emptiness, they find flint tools, animal bones, and faint carvings, antelopes, circles, arrows, all etched into the stones. Sometimes, in the center of an enclosure, they find a single standing stone, a marker, or perhaps an altar. Could these have been the earliest ritual centers of the desert peoples? A fusion of survival and belief, where every hunt was an offering, every line of stone a prayer for balance between man and the wild? Some researchers point out that many kites share geometric precision. The angles of their funnels repeat the same ratios found in Neolithic monuments thousands of kilometers away from the Caucasus to Kazakhstan. Could knowledge have spread across continents, carried by travelers from an older global culture? Or is it proof that humans everywhere, faced with the same challenge, find the same solution? Markahuasi had its face in the mountain. Cappadocia had its thrones of stone. Arabia had its wings across the sand. The desert kites are silent now. The herds they once trapped are gone. The wind their only hunter. But from the air, their lines still shine faintly under the sun. A memory etched into the earth itself. Perhaps that is their real message, not just of hunting, but of cooperation, of engineering, of the first time humanity learned to think as one, to build something vast enough that it could only exist if everyone worked together. We often call ourselves the age of machines. But thousands of years before engines, before metal, before writing, the people of Arabia built machines out of stone, machines that used landscape, instinct, and patience as their moving parts. As you stand among the scattered rocks, it's impossible not to feel a kind of awe. There are no ruins of temples here, no statues, no names, only the geometry of purpose, lines that lead into the unknown. So were the desert kites truly hunting machines? Or were they something greater, part of a system that connected earth and sky, people and animals, life and death? Perhaps we'll never know, but when the sun sinks low, and the shadows stretch across the sand, the lines seem to move again, alive in the fading light, the ghost circles of Namibia's fairy rings. In the heart of southern Africa, where the Namib Desert stretches in endless waves of copper-red sand, there lies a mystery so vast it can be seen from space. Scattered across the desert plains are countless perfect circles, bare patches where no grass dares to grow. Tens of thousands of them, dotting the land like the fingerprints of gods. From above, they look like a constellation turned upside down, ghostly rings burned into the earth stretching for hundreds of kilometers across Namibia's emptiness. To the Himba tribes who live nearby, they are the footprints of the gods, marks left behind by ancient spirits walking the desert before time began. To scientists, they are a puzzle that refuses to be solved. Each circle is ringed by a halo of living grass, taller and greener than anything around it, a perfect outline of life surrounding a core of death. They range from a few feet to over 40 feet across. And the strangest part, they move. Over decades they appear, vanish, and reappear somewhere else, as if alive. The first explorers who saw them in the early 1900s thought they were the result of lightning strikes or underground gas vents. Later, others blamed termites, radiation, even alien landings. But every time one theory seems to fit, another cracks it apart. Standing among them feels otherworldly. The silence is heavy, the sand glows under the sun like rusted gold. There are no footprints, no plants, no stones inside the circles, just perfect emptiness, surrounded by green. Even the wind seems to avoid them. The local Himba call them Ochi Hamuka, the places where the gods breathe. In their stories, these circles are breathing holes for spirits beneath the earth, invisible beings that rise in the night and drink the life from the soil. To step inside one at dawn, they say, is to stand between worlds, but scientists have been chasing a more earthly answer for decades. One group discovered that beneath the circles, the sand holds unusual moisture patterns, wetter at the edges, drier in the center. That strange balance allows the grass on the rim to thrive, while the center stays barren. Another team found colonies of sand termites building vast underground networks around the circles, cutting the roots of plants in the middle while farming water at the edges. Each circle, they said, was a self-organizing system, an ancient alliance between water, soil, and life. But then came the satellite images. They showed that these patterns aren't random at all. The circles form mathematical grids, with near-perfect spacing like honeycomb geometry stretched across the desert. No animal could plan such precision. No natural chaos should produce it. So the debate deepened. Is this a living landscape, a self-organizing biological code, a natural intelligence of the desert? Or are we staring at the traces of something lost, the remnants of forgotten rituals or energies left by civilizations long gone? Because the fairy rings aren't only in Namibia anymore. Identical patterns have been found in Australia's outback, in Arabia's dry plains, even faintly beneath the sands near Egypt's borders, thousands of miles apart, yet the same geometry, the same size, the same ghostly perfection. How? Why? Some researchers whisper about ancient climate engineering, that long before written history, people may have shaped the land to trap moisture and survive the desert. Others, more daring, speak of pre-flood civilizations, of lost knowledge of resonance and magnetism that could alter soil and growth. To them, the fairy rings are not natural. They are scars, marks left by something that once burned or pulled energy from the ground. When the rains come, rarely the circles light up in contrast, green halos glowing against red earth, like bioluminescent marks seen from the sky. Pilots flying over at dusk report the strange illusion that they pulse, hundreds of glowing eyes opening in the desert twilight. It's no wonder they call them the ghost circles. Modern measurements show that each ring lasts between 30 and 60 years before fading and being replaced by a new one nearby. The pattern survives even as the individual circles die, like cells in a living organism, renewing themselves endlessly. The Namib Desert, it seems, is alive, and in that realization lies something deeper, a hint that the earth itself is capable of thought-like behavior. These circles could be the language of balance, the desert's way of distributing life in a place where survival should be impossible, a message in geometry, that even in emptiness there is design. At night, under the vast African sky, the fairy rings shimmer faintly under starlight. The wind moves through them like breath through an ancient flute. You can almost believe the Himba were right, that something sleeps beneath the sand, something that dreams in circles. Perhaps that's why no final answer ever stays. Every explanation, no matter how logical, feels incomplete, as if the desert keeps its secret just out of reach. Maybe it's science, maybe it's spirit, maybe both. But one truth stands. These circles are ancient, older than memory, older than language, and as long as they remain, whispering across the sands of Namibia, we are reminded that the earth is not a dead thing beneath our feet. It's alive, aware, and still creating patterns beyond our understanding. The ghost circles continue to appear, silent, precise, eternal, each one a breath, each one a heartbeat, each one a reminder that even in the emptiest desert, something is watching back. The mysterious stone spheres of Bosnia. Hidden deep within the forests of Bosnia and Herzegovina, scattered among moss-covered slopes and quiet river valleys, lie hundreds of perfect stone spheres, silent, heavy, and impossibly smooth. Some are the size of bowling balls. Others are as wide as cars. A few, buried halfway in the soil, are larger than a man can reach around. At first glance they seem simple, weathered boulders, shaped by time, but step closer, and the illusion breaks. Each sphere is mathematically perfect, carved with precision that even modern machines struggle to match. They are not random, they are deliberate. Villagers whisper about them as dragon eggs, left behind by ancient gods. Children grow up hearing that touching one can bring either fortune or curse. But scientists, explorers, and believers from around the world come here for another reason, to find out who or what made them. The first of these spheres was uncovered near the Bosnian town of Zavidovici, where a farmer clearing his land struck something solid beneath the earth. As he dug, the soil gave way to smooth stone, curved, symmetrical, perfect. Soon more appeared, dozens of them, half buried in the hillsides. Each one had the same geometry, the same finish, as if forged by the same ancient hand. Measurements stunned archaeologists. Some spheres weighed more than 30 tons. The largest, nearly 3 meters across, rivaled the famous stone spheres of Costa Rica. Yet Bosnia had no known civilization capable of shaping granite or sandstone with such accuracy thousands of years ago. So the mystery deepened. Were they relics of a forgotten people, a culture erased by flood or time? Or are they natural formations, the result of millennia of geological pressure and mineral growth? The debate became fierce. Some geologists proposed a natural process called concretion, where minerals gather and solidify into spherical shapes, but skeptics pointed out that natural concretions rarely reach such size, uniformity, and polish, and almost never appear in clusters across vast regions. Satellite surveys revealed something even stranger. The spheres aren't randomly scattered. They align roughly in patterns of triangles and spirals, echoing ancient constellations visible over the Balkans thousands of years ago. Coincidence or forgotten design? And then came the legends. Old Bosnian folk songs, rarely heard outside remote villages, speak of a time before the Great Flood, when the children of stone ruled the valleys. They built towers, circles, and orbs of power, the hearts of the earth, said to channel energies from below. When the waters rose, their cities sank, but the spheres, too heavy to be moved, remained. Many locals still believe these orbs hum with earth energy. Visitors claim their compasses spin near them, their phones glitch, and cameras flicker with static. Some say when you touch the stone you feel warmth, as if something deep within it is alive. No scientific test has confirmed it, but no one can disprove it either. In 2016, a Bosnian archaeologist, Dr. Risamakocing, reignited global fascination when he uncovered a massive stone sphere half buried in Visako's forest. He declared it man-made, possibly one of the oldest artifacts in Europe, dating back over 30,000 years. Critics dismissed it as pseudoscience, but when samples from the stone were tested, they showed an unusual density, harder than most local rock. Some geologists quietly admitted, if this is natural, it's unlike any concretion we've ever seen. So the question lingers, was Bosnia once home to an unknown megalithic culture, capable of carving and transporting perfect stone spheres long before recorded history? The deeper you look, the stranger it gets. In nearby valleys, ancient foundations have been found, circular stone platforms buried beneath sediment as if once built to hold or display these spheres. Magnetic surveys show symmetrical patterns underground like the remains of a lost architectural plan. Could these have been markers of power, aligned with the stars or energy lines of the Earth? Some researchers suggest they could be part of a pre-flood global network. Similar spheres have been found in Costa Rica, Mexico, New Zealand, Egypt, and China, all at similar latitudes, all sharing the same geometry. Different continents, same mysterious design. It's as if ancient builders around the world shared one blueprint, one idea, passed down through forgotten ages. At night, under the Bosnian stars, the forest turns silent around them. Moonlight glides across their smooth surfaces, casting soft halos through the mist. You feel it then, the sense that these are not just stones. They are timekeepers, survivors from a world washed away. Maybe they were tools of astronomy, measuring celestial cycles. Maybe they marked sacred burial grounds. Maybe they were part of something far greater, a machine, now broken and scattered. Or maybe they are warnings. Because in every culture where stone spheres appear, myths of a great flood follow. A cataclysm that ended one world and began ours. Perhaps these stones were placed to mark what was lost, a message to the future carved in the hardest material of all. Touching one, you feel the weight of it, not just physical. The underground catacombs of Odessa. Beneath the coastal city of Odessa, Ukraine, lies another world, a labyrinth so vast, so endless, that no one knows its full reach. A world built in darkness, and perhaps meant to stay there. They call them the Odessa catacombs, but that name barely captures what they are. This is not a single tunnel, or even a few hundred. This is an underground continent, thousands of kilometers of twisting passageways, carved beneath homes, forests, and the sea. From the air, Odessa looks ordinary, but beneath its streets there's a maze more complex than any city above, a honeycomb of stone, silence, and shadow. For centuries, no map has captured it fully. Even modern explorers with GPS and lights have gotten lost, their final echoes swallowed by the earth. The first tunnels were dug in the 19th century, when quarrymen carved out limestone to build the growing city. The same stone that raised Odessa's beautiful facades came from the darkness below. But the deeper they dug, the more they connected, until the quarries merged into an endless web. By the time the work stopped, an entire subterranean empire had formed beneath their feet. Yet, that's only the official story, because locals whisper that not all of the tunnels were man-made, that some of the oldest chambers were already there, carved long before Odessa ever existed. Archaeologists have found sections of the catacombs where the walls are too smooth, the angles too precise, and the depth far deeper than any 19th century tools could have reached. These ancient passages cut through solid limestone in ways that even modern drills would struggle to copy. Some chambers are massive, arched vaults resembling forgotten temples, their ceilings blackened by centuries of torch smoke. No one knows who made them or why. The people of Odessa speak of legends beneath the sea, stories of an ancient people who lived underground to escape a flood that drowned their world. In those myths, the tunnels weren't quarries, they were refuges, carved in panic as the waters rose. The survivors built their city below the surface, carrying fire into the dark. Some explorers claim to have found symbols carved deep within the oldest walls, spirals, eyes, and patterns resembling the constellations visible over the Black Sea, thousands of years ago. Others speak of rooms with strange acoustics, where sound bends and echoes in circles, like the chambers were designed for ritual, not refuge. If true, then the Odessa catacombs may not be just man-made tunnels, but the remnants of something far older. During wars, rebels and soldiers hid down here. In World War II, the catacombs became a fortress of resistance, a shadow city where partisans lived, fought, and vanished. But even they told stories of deeper places they dared not go. Tunnels where air turned cold without reason, where compasses spun, and the light seemed to bend around invisible corners. Urban explorers today describe the same: a constant hum, a faint vibration under the stone. Some swear it feels like the tunnels are alive, as if the earth itself is breathing through them. Scientists too are puzzled. Geological scans show that beneath some sections of the catacombs lie hollow cavities, massive spaces, yet untouched, and some of those voids aren't natural. They form patterns, perfect geometric chambers that suggest deliberate design. The Ukrainian researchers who discovered this in 2013 found something else: magnetic anomalies that distort instruments near those sealed chambers. Whatever lies beneath, it resists exploration. It's as if the catacombs hide something, or protect it. Deeper inside, where few have gone, explorers found stone platforms covered in mineral dust and walls with faint, circular carvings. They look eerily similar to the designs found in the megalithic sites of Turkey and the Balkans. Göbekli Tepe, Chogazandil, the Caucasus dolmens, different lands, same symbols, coincidence, or memory passed down through lost civilizations. There's a theory whispered among the fringe researchers that long before the rise of Egypt, Sumer, or Greece, an advanced culture lived around the Black Sea basin, building underground sanctuaries to survive the great flood that reshaped the earth. If that's true, the Odessa catacombs could be one of their last surviving footprints, a post-Diluvian refuge, still echoing under modern streets. Every year new tunnels are discovered, old maps are proven wrong, and yet, no one reaches the end. Down there, the air is thick and still. Your own breathing sounds too loud, and sometimes, explorers hear whispers, faint, distant voices that seem to come from behind solid walls. It could be echoes, or it could be memory. There are sections locals call the Black Tunnels, where the stone turns darker, denser, older. Light fades faster there, and compasses stop working entirely. No one knows how deep those tunnels go. Some believe they connect to underground river systems, others, that they link to ancient sea caverns beneath the coast. In some maps, lines extend far beyond Odessa, stretching toward Moldova, Romania, even Crimea. If that's true, then the catacombs are not just an accident of mining. They are the remains of a massive prehistoric network, a civilization's nervous system, carved in secret, long before our history began. Even the sea nearby holds clues. Divers have found sunken stone blocks off Odessa's shore, carved shapes resting beneath layers of sediment, as if an older city once stood there before the sea claimed it. What if the tunnels below are what's left of that world, the last chambers of a drowned civilization? The deeper you think, the darker it gets, because these tunnels aren't empty, they hold time, frozen layers of human fear, memory, and survival. Every wall tells a story, a miner's mark, a partisan's initials, a prehistoric carving, smoothed by centuries. History collapses down here, the forgotten tombs of Lothal. On the western coast of India, where the desert meets the sea and salt flats stretch into the horizon, lies a ruin that once pulsed with life. The place is called Lothal, meaning the Mound of the Dead, one of the southernmost cities of the ancient Indus Valley civilization. Today it is a field of quiet earth and broken bricks. But thousands of years ago, this was one of the most advanced ports in the ancient world. It was a city of merchants, builders, and seafarers who understood the tides long before any empire mapped the oceans. Yet hidden beneath its story of trade and prosperity lies something far more mysterious: the existence of a series of sealed chambers that archaeologists still struggle to explain. They call them the Forgotten Tombs of Lothal. Lothal was founded around 2400 BCE, when the Indus civilization was at its peak. It was built with astonishing precision, streets laid out in perfect grids, brick walls aligned to the cardinal directions, and drainage systems that could rival those of modern towns. At its heart was a massive dockyard connected to an ancient river that once flowed to the Arabian Sea. Traders came from faraway lands, from Mesopotamia, Oman, and perhaps even Africa. They brought copper, ivory, and lapis lazuli, and in return carried home cotton, spices, and beads made with a craftsmanship the world had never seen. To those who lived here, Lothal was not just a city, it was a symbol of control over nature, a place where human design mastered flood, fire, and the sea itself. But beyond the harbor walls, in an area once believed to be a storage yard, excavators discovered something strange. Beneath the layers of silt were a series of narrow chambers, built of the same baked bricks as the city above, but arranged in careful rows and sealed with stone slabs. When they were opened, they contained no human bones, no urns, and no remains. Instead, each chamber held small artifacts, clay seals marked with inscriptions, tiny shell bangles, and fragments of ivory. There was no pattern, no single object to define their purpose. Yet every chamber shared the same deliberate symmetry, the same respect for geometry. At first, archaeologists assumed these were simple storage vaults, but their orientation, precisely westward, contradicted that. They were too uniform, too symbolic. Over time, the theory changed. Perhaps these were tombs, not for individuals but for souls, symbolic burials for people lost at sea or washed away by floods. The discovery aligned with ancient Harappan traditions of water as a purifier and a passage between worlds. To die near the ocean was to return to the cosmic source. If this interpretation is correct, the forgotten tombs of Lothal may represent one of the earliest known rituals of maritime burial, not of bodies, but of memory. The people of Lothal believed that everything, even death, flowed through water. Their dock was not only for trade, but also a spiritual gateway, where the living and the dead shared the same tide. The more the excavations expanded, the stranger the findings became. Beneath the tomb chambers were circular pits filled with ash, burnt clay, and animal bones. Some contained fragments of copper and small terracotta figurines. It appeared that rituals of fire and water were performed together, cremation without bodies, purification without remains. These were acts meant not to mourn, but to preserve balance. Historians have long admired the engineering genius of Lothal, the world's earliest known tidal dockyard, complete with spillways and locks. But few have noticed how the city's spiritual architecture mirrored its practical one. The same precision that guided their drains and streets shaped their sacred spaces. The people of Lothal believed that life flowed in cycles, that every storm, every flood, every tide was part of the same rhythm that governed existence. In their world, the sea was both creator and destroyer. To live by it meant to worship it, and to bury by it meant to trust it. Over the centuries, the land began to change. Rivers shifted, the tides turned, and the lush estuary that once surrounded Lothal became a dry, salty plain. The trade ships vanished, the canals filled with silt, but the tombs remained, sealed under the soil like memories refusing to fade. When archaeologists first opened them, traces of salt were found on the walls, as though seawater had once reached that far inland. Perhaps the city's final moments came not through war, but through the ocean itself, a great flood that swallowed its harbor and its dead alike. Local traditions, preserved in folk songs and oral stories, speak of a city that sank into the sea with its gods still awake. The story matches no recorded event, yet the evidence suggests something real, a massive deluge that swept through the region thousands of years ago, coinciding with the collapse of other Indus cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Dholavira. The forgotten tombs may have been built as a warning, a remembrance of the day when the water rose higher than any wall. Modern archaeologists see Lothal as a triumph of early urban planning, but beneath that rational history is something more human, a society aware of its fragility. The tombs are small, modest, but their precision speaks volumes. They were not built for kings or warriors, but for the ordinary souls whose lives were tied to the sea. They embody an understanding of impermanence, that no city, no empire, no monument lasts forever. Yet by encoding belief into architecture, the people of Lothal ensured that even when their language was lost, their message would remain. To walk through the ruins today is to walk through a ghost map. The outlines of homes and streets are still visible, their bricks sunburned to red and gray. The stone calendar of Adam's calendar. High on the misty plateau of Mpumalanga in South Africa, near the edge of the Great Escarpment, there lies a forgotten circle of stones. To an untrained eye, it might look like another scatter of boulders weathered by time. But when you stand among them, the alignment, the pattern, the deliberate placement begins to emerge. It feels like standing inside a design, a blueprint, something old and intentional. Locals call it Adam's calendar, and some believe it could be one of the oldest man-made structures on Earth. This site sits 1,800 meters above sea level, overlooking rolling hills and valleys that shimmer with gold in the sun. The air here carries a strange stillness. When the wind moves through the grass, it sounds like whispers through stone. The stones themselves, rough dolerite monoliths, are not random. Some stand upright like sentinels, others form circular and radial patterns. Archaeologists estimate there are hundreds of them scattered across the plateau, but the heart of the site is a circle roughly 30 meters across, with a ring of upright stones surrounding a central cluster that looks almost like a shattered clock. The first documented recognition of Adam's calendar came in the early 2000s, when pilot and explorer Johann Heine noticed the formation while flying over the region. From the air, he saw that the stones formed a nearly perfect circle and that two larger monoliths at the center aligned directly with the sunrise and sunset on the solstices. To Heine and a handful of researchers who followed him, this was no coincidence. It was a calendar, a prehistoric observatory designed to track the passage of time through the heavens. The alignments were measured again and again. On the equinoxes, the sun rose exactly over one marker and set behind another. On the solstices, its path shifted precisely to two different stones. For the researchers studying it, the accuracy was astonishing. Using astronomical software to backtrack the position of the sun through the ages, they estimated that the alignment would have been most accurate, not thousands, but tens of thousands of years ago, perhaps as far back as 75,000 BCE. If true, that would make Adam's calendar older than Stonehenge, older than the pyramids, older even than the first known agriculture. But mainstream archaeology remains cautious. Most scholars date the site to less than 2,000 years ago, possibly connected to local cattle herding communities. Yet the mystery persists. The stones themselves are heavily eroded, suggesting incredible age, and several bear marks that appear to have been shaped or carved. Some are magnetically polarized, showing measurable fields that modern instruments can detect. Others resonate when struck, producing tones that vary depending on the stone's position, almost like a musical instrument designed for the wind. So the debate splits into two worlds, the scientific and the mythic. In the mythic telling, Adam's calendar is not a mere monument. It is the birthplace of humanity, the first marker of time on Earth. According to this interpretation, this was where ancient people, possibly our earliest ancestors, observed the sky, tracked the movement of the sun, and synchronized their lives with the cosmos. Some even link it to the biblical Eden, claiming that this plateau once formed part of an ancient continent that stretched far into what is now the Indian Ocean. In this view, Adam's calendar was not built by primitive tribes, but by a lost civilization whose understanding of astronomy, geometry, and energy far exceeded what history allows. The surrounding landscape supports the sense of scale. Across Mpumalanga, thousands of circular stone ruins spread across the hills, some linked by long, straight channels of stone that run for kilometers. To most archaeologists, these are the remnants of Iron Age cattle kraals, but to the more speculative researchers, they are the ruins of a vast prehistoric city, built in a time when Africa's interior was the center of a forgotten world. The calendar, they say, was its core, its clock, its compass, its temple. Standing there, it's easy to understand why such ideas persist. The geometry feels too perfect, the placement too deliberate. You can see the sunrise slice through the horizon exactly where the central stones predict. You can feel the ancient logic in its design, a place where heaven and earth were measured together. Whether made by herders or something far older, the site's builders clearly cared deeply about the sky. There are also the magnetic anomalies. When researchers tested the stones, some gave off weak but distinct magnetic fields. No metal has ever been found in the stones themselves, yet the readings persist, suggesting natural magnetization aligned in ways that might have helped track celestial movement, or perhaps acted as markers for ritual or direction. Some visitors claim that compasses behave erratically near the center of the circle. The effect is small, but it adds to the mystery. Then there are the legends told by the local elders. They speak of a time when gods lived among men, when the land shone with gold and light. The mountains around Barberton and Mpumalanga are among the oldest on Earth. Geologists call them the Barberton Greenstone Belt, dated to more than 3.5 billion years. They contain traces of ancient life and minerals rich with gold. It's here that modern mining began, but local lore says the mines are far older, that long before recorded history, someone else came to dig for the tears of the sun. To the storytellers, Adam's calendar was their altar, the place they watched the heavens to mark the cycles of creation and return. Scientific restraint aside, something about the site refuses to be ordinary. Every culture that measured time, Egypt, Sumer, the Maya, did so with stone. Time, to the ancients, was sacred, a physical link between man and the divine. In that sense, even if Adam's calendar was built only a few thousand years ago, its purpose fits into a universal pattern: humanity's need to place order upon the sky, to turn the endless cycle of light and dark into meaning. When you walk through the stones, the air feels different. The plateau opens to a horizon that seems infinite. To the east, the sun rises exactly through the cleft between two monoliths. To the west, the land drops into valleys that once carried rivers toward the sea. The wind hums through the grass, and for a moment, it feels as if the stones themselves are listening. The stone hands of Cerro Section. In the arid valleys of northern Peru, where the desert sands drift endlessly toward the foothills of the Andes, there lies a ruin so strange and ancient that even the Inca called it the work of the Old Ones. Its name is Cerro Sechen, a low hill rising from the coastal plain near the Kasma River. From a distance it seems unremarkable, just a cluster of weather-beaten stones and a wall half buried in dust. But step closer, and you realize you're standing before one of the oldest carved monuments in all of the Americas. Cerro Sechin was built roughly 4,000 years ago, around 1800 BCE, a time when the pyramids of Egypt were already aging and when written language was still centuries away from appearing in the Andes. Yet here, in a forgotten valley of Peru, an unknown people had already mastered stone. They cut, polished, and engraved slabs of granite hauled from riverbeds miles away, arranging them to form walls that once encircled a ceremonial platform. At first, archaeologists thought these were simple retaining walls. Then they saw what was carved upon them. Hundreds of figures, life-sized, each etched with a precision that has barely faded, despite the passing of millennia. The carvings depict men, warriors perhaps, their bodies shown in profile, their faces detailed with lines that suggest emotion, even pain. Between them lie severed limbs, heads, and torsos. There are eyes staring upward, ribs exposed, organs rendered with disturbing realism. It is a scene of violence so explicit that many early researchers refused to believe it could come from such an ancient time. But the images are no illusion. They are history carved in granite. Whoever created Cerro Sechin wanted to tell a story, and to make sure that story would never be forgotten. As sunlight moves across the stones, the figures seem to shift, their shadows deepening in the carved cuts of knives and the curves of fingers. The site becomes a theater of memory. You can almost feel the noise that must once have filled this place, the chants of priests, the beating of drums, the smell of smoke and blood. Yet amid the chaos, a single motif repeats again and again: the hand. Some hands belong to the carved figures, others appear floating on their own, detached from bodies, pressed flat against the stone. They are perfectly formed, each finger defined, palms open as though imprinted by a living person. To some they look like warnings, to others blessings. The hands seem to speak across time: remember us, fear us, understand us. When the Peruvian archaeologist Julio C. Tello, often called the father of Andean archaeology, excavated the site in 1937, he was stunned. The realism of the carvings, he said, could only come from people who had seen what they depicted, the aftermath of real conflict. He called Cerro Sechin the earliest known record of warfare in the New World. But even he admitted the symbolism might be deeper than that. The walls appear to tell a story that unfolds as you move around them. The outer layers show battle, warriors in motion, weapons raised. The inner layers depict dismemberment and offering. And at the very center, surrounding the main platform, only the hands remain, empty, silent, still. Some are carved, reaching upward, others downward, as if bridging two worlds. It is as though the entire monument was designed as a journey, from violence to surrender, from life to something beyond. No written language survives from this culture, so interpretation relies on context. Archaeologists know that later civilizations in the region, like the Moche and Chavin, practiced ritual sacrifice and used art to express their cosmology. The balance between creation and destruction. Perhaps Cerro Sechin was their ancestor, the first experiment in telling that cosmic story through stone. The hands may represent not the victims of war but the power of transformation. In many ancient traditions, the open palm symbolizes offering, acceptance, or protection. To leave a handprint is to mark presence, to say, "I was here, and I give this to the gods." The people who carved these may have believed that through sacrifice, through giving up the physical, they kept the spiritual world in balance. Even today, standing among those stones, you feel that balance. The heat of the desert presses down, but the air inside the ruin is cool. The granite holds the night's chill, and the silence is almost total. The wind drifts through the valley, carrying faint traces of river water from miles away. Everything feels deliberate: the placement of each slab, the alignment of the walls to the cardinal points, the slight slope that channels rainwater toward a single drain. Nothing about Cerro Sechin seems accidental. In the 1970s, further excavations revealed that the visible walls were only the upper part of a much larger complex. Beneath them lay older structures, mud brick foundations, and floors stained dark from ancient fires. Radiocarbon tests confirmed that the site had been occupied for centuries before the carvings were added. That means the culture that built Cerro Sechin inherited the site from even older inhabitants, perhaps transforming an existing temple into something new, a monument to memory. Researchers also discovered traces of red pigment in the carved grooves of some stones. That means the carvings were once painted, their images brought vividly to life in color. The warriors would have gleamed red and black under the sun, their hands outlined in white or ochre. Imagine how the place must have looked 3,500 years ago. A wall of living stone, blood and paint glinting in the heat, each figure a guardian of history. And yet, despite decades of study, no one knows who they were. The builders left no name, no writing, no trace of their spoken language. Their descendants, if any survived, were absorbed by later cultures. The only voice they left is the voice of their stone. Some scholars believe the Sechin people were part of a broader movement across ancient Peru, a network of ceremonial centers that shared ideas, symbols, and beliefs long before empire or nation. Sites like Las Haldas, Casma, and Chonquilo show similar attention to astronomy and ritual alignment. Chonquilo, built a few centuries later, contains what may be the oldest solar observatory in the Americas. Cerro Sechin, with its east-facing entrance and hand-marked walls, may have served a similar dual role, both temple and calendar, both memorial and machine for measuring time. When light strikes the stones on the equinox, shadows align along a central axis leading directly to the mound's heart. For a few moments, the entire wall seems to breathe, its carvings animated by sunlight. The hands closest to the entrance are illuminated first. Then, as the sun climbs, the light moves inward until it reaches the innermost carvings where the final pair of hands are carved side by side, palms facing each other. At that instant, the whole site aligns. Sky, stone, shadow, and symbol in perfect harmony. To the ancient builders, this might have represented renewal, the victory of life over death, of light over darkness. In that sense, the stone hands are not emblems of violence, but of reconciliation. They are the moment when destruction gives way to creation again. The stone giants of San Agustin. In the Green Mountains of southern Colombia, where the Magdalena River begins its long journey to the Caribbean, there lies a place unlike any other on earth. Here, in the mists of the Andes, hundreds of massive stone statues stand guard over an ancient necropolis, carved from volcanic rock, staring through the fog with eyes that seem far older than time itself. This is San Agustin, one of the most enigmatic archaeological sites in South America. Its fields are filled with giants, stone guardians that have watched over the valleys for more than 2,000 years. Each one is different. Some stand tall and solemn, others grin with fierce expressions, their teeth bared like animals. Some hold weapons, others cradle infants. A few are half human, half serpent, with wings or fangs or claws. They are unlike anything else in the ancient Americas. Neither Inca nor Maya, neither Aztec nor Chavin. They belong to a people who left no written word, no name, no story, only these colossal stone beings. The San Agustin culture flourished between 1000 BCE and 800 CE, deep in the Andean highlands of what is now Colombia's Huila department. The people who built these monuments lived far from the great centers of Andean civilization. They had no pyramids, no sprawling cities, no empires. Yet their stonework, their art, their mythology speaks of a sophistication that rivals the finest civilizations of the ancient world. Archaeologists first stumbled upon the site in the late 18th century, when Spanish explorers heard rumors of strange statues hidden in the jungle. When they arrived, they found hundreds of them, some standing upright, others toppled or half buried, their faces worn smooth by centuries of rain. The statues guarded tombs, built of massive slabs of andesite, arranged in circles or lines, sometimes connected by stairways and terraces carved into the mountain. But no treasure was found inside, only bones, pottery, and silence. The carvings are breathtaking in their complexity. Some of the statues stand over 4 meters tall, carved from single blocks of volcanic stone. The tools required to create them, chisels of harder rock or possibly bronze, would have been painstakingly slow. Yet each surface is polished, every detail carefully shaped. Their creators were not crude sculptors, they were master artisans. The most famous figures depict guardians, anthropomorphic beings with human bodies and animal faces, jaguars, eagles, snakes, crocodiles. Their hands are crossed over their chests, their mouths are wide and toothy. Some carry staffs or shields, others hold ritual knives. They were protectors, intermediaries between the living and the dead. Around them stand smaller statues, children, servants, and mythic creatures that seem to blend human and divine. At first glance it looks like a graveyard, a city of stone meant to honor the dead. But San Agustin is far more than a necropolis. It is a map, a sacred landscape carved into the earth itself. The statues align with the hills, rivers, and stars. Every direction, every sightline, every grouping seems deliberate. It is as if the builders were encoding their cosmology, their view of the universe directly into the terrain. Archaeologists have identified over 600 stone sculptures across the region, though many more remain buried or lost. Some are hidden deep in ravines, others stand alone on remote ridges. They vary in style and age, but all share the same symbolic language: transformation, duality, guardianship. It is a language that speaks not through words but through form, a philosophy expressed in stone. The local myths of the Andes tell of ancient giants who lived before the time of humans, beings who taught the people how to work the land, to honor the sun, and to speak with the spirits of the earth. When their time ended, they turned themselves to stone so they could watch over the world forever. The villagers who live near San Agustin still tell this story. They believe the statues are those giants, turned to stone to protect the living from whatever sleeps beneath the hills. Some statues seem to confirm that legend. There are figures with exaggerated proportions, huge hands, wide mouths, immense eyes. Their expressions are neither peaceful nor angry, but eternal, the look of something caught between worlds. They seem alive, frozen in mid-thought. The layout of San Agustin adds to the mystery. The statues are arranged around mounds, terraces, and cairns that resemble small pyramids. Some of these mounds contain burial chambers lined with basalt slabs. Others appear empty, perhaps symbolic tombs for gods rather than men. The entire complex stretches across several square kilometers, connected by ancient stone paths and staircases. It is not one site, but many, a network of shrines that once formed the heart of a spiritual landscape. Archaeologists believe the San Agustin people built their monuments to represent their cosmic hierarchy. The human figures stood for the living, the animal-headed ones for the spirits of nature, and the hybrid beings for deities who bridged both realms. The orientation of the statues often faces east, toward the rising sun, symbol of rebirth. In that sense, San Agustin was not a city of the dead, but a city of resurrection, a place where death was only a doorway. Excavations have revealed that beneath the largest statues lie layers of offerings, gold beads, obsidian tools, carved shells from distant coasts. These people traded widely, crossing mountains and jungles to bring materials from hundreds of kilometers away. They were connected, not isolated. They understood the rhythms of trade, astronomy, and ritual long before writing existed in this part of the world. And then, sometime around the year 800 CE, they vanished. The workshops went silent, the tombs were sealed, the jungle returned. No one knows why. There was no sign of war, no evidence of famine. It was as if the builders simply walked away, leaving their stone guardians behind to wait in the mist. Some researchers believe the site was abandoned because of a changing climate, forcing the population to migrate. Others think it was a deliberate act, a spiritual closure of a sacred place that had fulfilled its purpose. Perhaps the people of San Agustin believed that their time among the living had ended, and the statues would continue their work for eternity. Whatever the truth, the site remains hauntingly alive. At dawn, when the fog drifts down from the mountains, the giants emerge slowly from the mist. One by one, silhouettes at first, then faces, then details. The valley grows quiet, and for a moment it feels as if time has folded back upon itself. You are no longer in the modern world, but standing in the presence of something ancient and eternal. The lost city of Zerzura. In the farthest reaches of the Sahara Desert, where sand stretches to the horizon and the wind moves like a whisper across dunes, there is said to be a hidden city, a city of white stone and still water, surrounded by palms and guarded by ancient silence. Its name is Zerzura, the city of the birds. For centuries, explorers and traders spoke of it in quiet tones, unsure if they were recounting myth or memory. It was said to lie somewhere beyond the Gilf Kebir Plateau, deep in the western desert of Egypt, where the Sahara becomes a sea of emptiness. The stories describe a place untouched by time, a city built of gleaming stone, its gates watched over by giant birds carved in marble. Inside, treasure was said to glitter beneath the desert sun, guarded by tall men with fair skin and blue eyes. Most dismissed it as a mirage, a traveler's tale born from heat and distance. But others believed the legend hid a truth, that somewhere within the dunes lay the last remnant of a forgotten civilization. The first written account of Zerzura appears in an Arabic manuscript known as the Kitab al-Kanuz, or the Book of Hidden Treasures, compiled around the 13th century. It describes a valley of lush gardens, hidden springs, and white walls that shimmered in the sun. The manuscript tells of an ancient king who buried his treasures there before the desert swallowed his kingdom. It also warns that the city is protected by spirits, the jinn of the sands. Those who seek it, it says, must enter with a pure heart, or not at all. Over the centuries, caravans crossing from the Nile to Libya brought back rumors of a green valley deep in the desert, a place where birds flocked in the middle of the sand sea. The Bedouin tribes who roamed the region called it Zerzura, meaning the oasis of little birds. To them it was a sacred place, perhaps even cursed, a world between life and death. In the early 20th century, the legend began to attract Western explorers. They were drawn not only by curiosity, but by science, the desire to map the last unknown corners of the earth. Among them was the Hungarian-born adventurer László Almásy, a name later immortalized in the film The English Patient. Almásy was convinced that Zerzura was real, not myth. He believed it lay hidden somewhere beyond the Gilf Kebir, in a region few outsiders had ever reached. In 1932, Almásy and a team of explorers set out across the desert in open-topped Ford trucks, carrying only minimal supplies, compasses, and a deep sense of faith. Their route took them through terrain so harsh that even Bedouins avoided it. Fields of soft sand where vehicles could sink within minutes, and cliffs of black rock where temperatures soared past 50 degrees Celsius. Days passed without sight of anything but emptiness. The desert was silent, the horizon endless. At night, the sky opened like a cathedral of stars. Almashi wrote later that it was easy to imagine an entire world lost beneath that silence. Then, one afternoon, his expedition came across something extraordinary: rock paintings high in a cave on the Gilf Kebir Plateau. The figures were human and animal, painted in red and white, showing swimming people surrounded by water. This was shocking, because the region was one of the driest on Earth. The paintings were proof that this desert had once been fertile, a place of rivers and lakes. Almashi believed he was standing near the site of Zerzura itself. If this region had once been green, perhaps a city had stood here before the desert took it. His discovery sparked worldwide attention. Archaeologists, historians, and geographers began to wonder whether the Sahara had once supported a civilization long before Egypt's pyramids rose along the Nile. Yet despite decades of searching, no one has ever found the city. There are no walls of white stone, no carved birds, no gates or treasure, only endless dunes, canyons, and dry wadis. But the legend persists, because every time someone looks deeper into the desert, the past seems to stir. Modern satellite imaging has revealed ancient riverbeds buried beneath the sands, long, winding channels that once flowed across the Sahara. Around these dry channels, archaeologists have found stone tools, pottery fragments, and traces of habitation dating back more than 9,000 years. The Sahara, it turns out, was not always a desert. It was once a green world, with grasslands, lakes, and thriving communities. If Zerzura existed, it may have belonged to that lost time, a period before the desert expanded, when the climate shifted and people were forced to migrate toward the Nile. Some may have stayed behind, their cities slowly buried by dust. To this day, Bedouins still speak of a hidden valley beyond the dunes, where water still runs and palms still grow. They say its entrance is invisible, revealed only to those the desert allows to find it. Scientists may dismiss it as folklore, but in a land this vast, where ancient rivers vanish beneath the sand, it's hard to be certain. Standing on the Gilf Kebir Plateau, you feel the scale of the Sahara, its emptiness, its immensity, its power to erase. The wind erases footprints within minutes, the horizon swallows all direction. In such a place, myth and reality blur easily. It's easy to believe that a city could disappear here, not into time, but into space. For those who search for Zerzura, the city has become more than a physical destination. It's a symbol of discovery, of loss, of the eternal human wish to find what has been forgotten. The Pyramid of Gunung Padang. In the mist-covered highlands of West Java, Indonesia, there rises a hill that has puzzled explorers, scientists, and storytellers alike. From a distance it looks ordinary, a green ridge surrounded by valleys and rice terraces. But as you climb its slopes, the ground changes. The soil becomes darker, the air cooler, and the stones beneath your feet begin to take shape. At the summit, the hill reveals itself. Huge basalt columns, cut into rectangular blocks, are arranged in terraces that step upward toward the sky. Some lie scattered like fallen pillars, others still stand in neat rows. The people who live nearby call it Gunung Padang, the mountain of enlightenment. For centuries, it has been a sacred place, known to villagers as an ancient site of prayer and power. But only recently have scientists begun to realize that Gunung Padang may be something far more extraordinary, perhaps even the oldest pyramid on Earth. Gunung Padang sits about 120 kilometers south of Jakarta, surrounded by forests and steep hills. The site first came to attention in the early 1900s when Dutch explorers noted its strange layout and the unusual arrangement of its stones. They believed it was the ruins of an old megalithic shrine, built by early Sundanese peoples a few thousand years ago. But in the decades that followed, the mystery deepened. Archaeologists studying the site found that the basalt blocks were not scattered randomly. They formed terraces, walls, and platforms that seemed carefully designed. The entire hill was aligned with the cardinal directions, like a massive stepped structure buried beneath the vegetation. Then, in the 2010s, Indonesian geologists began using ground-penetrating radar and seismic scans to look below the surface. What they found changed everything. Beneath the visible terraces, the instruments detected layers of stone and chambers descending deep into the hill, at least 30 meters below ground. The scans revealed shapes and densities inconsistent with natural geology. It appeared that the hill itself was not entirely natural, but a man-made structure built in stages over thousands of years. If true, Gunung Padang would not simply be a temple built on a hill, it would be the hill, a pyramid covered by soil, built long before the age of the pharaohs. The leader of the investigation, geologist Dr. Danny Hillman, Natawijaya, proposed a radical idea that the oldest layers of Gunung Padang could date back to around 25,000 to 30,000 years ago, to the end of the last ice age, when most of the world's civilizations were still thought to be hunter-gatherers. The claim was controversial, even shocking. Mainstream archaeology holds that complex societies, capable of large-scale construction, did not appear until about 10,000 years ago, after the rise of agriculture. A pyramid tens of thousands of years old would rewrite human history, but the evidence demanded attention. Carbon dating of organic material trapped between the stones returned unusually old ages, some nearly 20,000 years. The deeper the samples, the older they became. Excavations revealed that the visible megalithic terraces on top were only the final phase of construction. Beneath them lay older layers of stonework, arranged in geometric formations that continued far below the surface. It seemed as though each generation had built upon the ruins of an earlier one, restoring and reshaping a structure that was already ancient by their time. Local tradition supports this view. The people of West Java have long spoken of Gunung Padang as a mountain built by the ancestors, a place of knowledge and awakening. Some legends even claim it was raised by a great king or godlike figure named Prabu Siliwangi, who commanded the stones to move by themselves to form his palace. According to myth, the work stopped when dawn came, leaving the structure forever unfinished. To villagers, the mountain is alive. They say it hums on quiet nights, and that lights sometimes appear above it, moving silently through the mist. Scientists dismiss these stories as folklore, but they echo an old truth, that this place has drawn reverence and fear for as long as anyone can remember. When researchers from Indonesia's National Team for Disaster Mitigation visited the site in 2012, their ground scans confirmed the presence of hidden cavities deep within the hill, possible chambers or tunnels sealed long ago. But excavation has been slow and controversial. The government has limited digging to protect the site's cultural and geological integrity. As a result, what lies beneath remains unknown. The upper terraces, however, tell their own story. The basalt blocks that make up the structure are prismatic columns, naturally formed by volcanic cooling, but clearly arranged by human hands. They are set in patterns that repeat, rows, circles, and stairways. Each terrace is flat and carefully leveled, suggesting deliberate engineering. The blocks interlock in ways that resist erosion, similar to the precision masonry of the Inca in South America or the megalithic builders of Easter Island. No mortar binds them, yet they have survived thousands of years of earthquakes and rain. Whoever built Gunung Padang understood not only stone, but the living forces of the earth. The orientation of the site is equally intriguing. The main axis points roughly northwest, aligning with the sunset on certain days of the year, possibly solstices or equinoxes. Some researchers believe the builders tracked celestial events, using the terraces as observation platforms. If so, Gunung Padang could have functioned as both temple and calendar, linking heaven and earth through geometry. What's perhaps most mysterious is the hill's internal composition. Seismic tomography shows that the deeper layers form rectangular zones of varying density, suggesting chambers filled with different materials, stone, sand, or possibly voids. One scan revealed what could be a central cavity roughly 10 meters wide, surrounded by solid rock. Was it a burial chamber, a ritual hall, or simply a natural void mistaken for architecture? No one can say for sure. Still, the sheer scale of the anomaly suggests intent. Nature rarely produces shapes this regular, especially beneath an already symmetrical structure. Many researchers now believe that Gunung Padang represents not just an ancient site, but an entire sequence of civilizations, each building atop the last, leaving behind layers of history hidden beneath the soil. Standing atop the highest terrace, you can see the surrounding hills rolling away into the mist. The air is quiet, heavy with the scent of rain and volcanic earth. The stones underfoot are cool and smooth, their surfaces marked by centuries of ritual offerings. Locals still visit to leave flowers or light incense, continuing a line of worship that may stretch back tens of millennia. For archaeologists, this continuity is remarkable. Few sites on Earth show such a clear, unbroken thread between myth, culture, and structure. Gunung Padang is not a ruin of the past. It's a living monument, still sacred, still respected, still unexplained. The stone ship of Ain stones. Along the southern coast of Sweden, high above the gray waters of the Baltic Sea, there stands a shape that seems older than the wind that moves across it. On a grassy headland at Siberia, 90-odd boulders rise in two curving rows, forming the outline of a great ship nearly 70 meters long. From above, it looks as if a stone vessel were sailing forever toward the horizon. The locals call it Ail's Stenar, Ail's stones. The stones are rough, weathered by centuries of rain and salt air, their surfaces streaked with lichen and the fine cracks of age. Yet their arrangement is precise. Each boulder is set upright, tapering toward the ends like a keel and bow. The longer you look, the clearer it becomes that this is not a random scatter of rocks. Someone designed it. Someone measured, lifted, and placed each stone to capture both form and meaning. For generations, fishermen, farmers, and travelers have stood here and wondered who that someone was. According to legend, the ship is the grave of a chieftain named Ail, a sea king buried standing upright so that he might continue his voyage into the afterlife. Others say it marks the landing place of ancient gods, or the cradle of Sweden's first sailors. Whatever the story, it carries the same tone of reverence. This is not just stone, it is memory anchored in the earth. Modern archaeologists have dated Ain stones to somewhere between 500 and 1100 CE, near the end of the Nordic Iron Age. But the site may be older still. Beneath the monument, excavations have found traces of charcoal and burnt bones that push its beginnings back to the Bronze Age, perhaps 3,000 years ago. The layers suggest a place returned to again and again, rebuilt or reimagined by each generation that came after. The form of the stone ship is common in Scandinavia, where more than 100 smaller examples are known. Most served as burial or ritual monuments, built by coastal peoples who saw life and death as a single voyage. The ship symbolized transition, a vessel to carry the soul across the unknown sea. Ain stones is by far the largest and most perfectly preserved of them all, standing on a cliff that falls steeply to the water below. From here, the Baltic stretches eastward without end. The horizon itself becomes part of the design. In summer, the light over southern Sweden is long and silver, fading slowly into dusk. As the sun sinks, its rays pass directly through the line of stones at the ship's stern. At midsummer sunset and midwinter sunrise, the alignment is exact. The boulders frame the sun as if they were built to track its movement across the sky. When surveyed with modern instruments, the geometry proves deliberate. The axis of the ship points toward these two moments of the year, the turning points of the solar cycle. Whoever built Ain stones was not only honoring the dead, but observing the heavens. This discovery has transformed how researchers view the site. It is not simply a grave, but also a calendar in stone, a kind of northern counterpart to the solar monuments of southern Europe. The builders understood the rhythm of light, the return of seasons, the balance of sky and sea that governed survival in these latitudes. For them, navigation, farming, and ritual were all part of the same knowledge. The stones themselves are a type of granite not found nearby. Many were dragged from several kilometers away, up steep slopes to this exposed ridge. Each weighs between 5 and 10 tons. Moving them would have required teams of people, ropes of twisted hide or fiber, wooden rollers, and enormous patience. The effort speaks of purpose. No society would invest such labor without believing that the monument mattered. When archaeologists lifted the turf inside the ship's outline, they found no royal tomb, no chamber of gold, only a layer of small stones arranged like ballast and fragments of burnt wood and bone. The absence of wealth does not mean absence of meaning. In Nordic belief, fire released the spirit, and ash was scattered to the wind and sea. The monument itself, its scale, its alignment, became the vessel for remembrance. The dead did not need to be buried here, they only needed to be remembered here. The site's location adds another dimension. It lies close to the meeting point of land, sea, and sky, a place where storms roll in from the Baltic and clouds sweep low over the cliffs. In such a setting, even small changes in weather feel immense. The monument amplifies that feeling. Stand at the bow of the stone ship on a windy day, and the sound of air moving between the stones becomes a kind of low music, a hum that rises and falls like the Erdstall tunnels of Europe. Across the hills and forests of Central Europe, from Ireland to Austria, from Bavaria to Hungary, there runs a hidden network of narrow tunnels carved deep into the earth. They twist beneath farmland, through limestone and granite, sometimes emerging in cellars, sometimes vanishing beneath roots and fields. No maps record them, no ancient texts describe them, and yet thousands exist. Locals call them Erdstella, earth stables, but no one truly knows who made them, or why. Each tunnel is small, barely wide enough for a person to crawl through. Some passages run straight for a few meters. Others curve in tight loops that connect to small chambers no bigger than a closet. The walls are smooth and hand-hewn, the ceilings rounded. There is no sign of tool marks in most, as if the stone were scraped away patiently over years. There is no evidence of fire, metal, or machinery. Everything about them is quiet and deliberate. The entrances are usually hidden. Some are found under churches or old barns, others behind cellar walls or in the middle of forests where no house ever stood. Inside, the air is still, the darkness absolute. Many tunnels contain a feature that archaeologists call the schlup, or slip hole, a small round opening just large enough for a person to squeeze through, connecting one chamber to another. Moving through one requires you to crawl on your belly and exhale to fit. For some, it feels like rebirth. For others, a test of endurance. More than 1,500 Erdstall tunnels have been documented across Europe, most concentrated in southern Germany and Austria, though new discoveries appear every few years. Their distribution is curious. Clusters appear near ancient settlement sites, but never directly underneath them. They seem to form a pattern just outside the edges of old villages, as if built to be close, but not part of everyday life. When archaeologists first explored them in the 1800s, they assumed the tunnels were medieval hideouts, secret shelters used during wars or raids. The idea made sense at first. Many tunnels do have narrow, defensible entrances, but there are problems with that theory. There are no remains of lamps, tools, or food, no soot stains from torches. The tunnels are too cramped to store supplies or livestock, and too uncomfortable for long refuge. Most importantly, they connect to nothing. No escape routes, no second exits, no ventilation. Anyone hiding inside for long would have suffocated. The next theory was religious. Some scholars suggested the Erdstall system might have served a ritual purpose, symbolic tombs or passages of initiation. The tight crawlways, the darkness, and the disorienting layout could represent a spiritual journey, a descent into the underworld, and a return to light. In many Indo-European traditions, crawling through narrow openings was part of purification rites, the rebirth of the soul through the earth. The slip holes might have served exactly that role, portals of transformation. Archaeological evidence supports a possible early medieval date. The few datable finds, fragments of pottery, a handful of tools, and carbonized wood point to construction sometime between the 10th and 13th centuries, though some may be older. Yet even in medieval records, there is silence. No charters, no church writings, no local accounts ever mention the tunnels being built. They simply appear ancient by the time of their discovery. In rural folklore, the Erdstelle are places of caution. In Bavaria, people once said they were the homes of the Unterirdische, the underground ones, a race of small pale beings who lived beneath the hills. In Austria, similar stories speak of the salamander folk, spirits of fire and stone who retreated underground when humans arrived. Farmers who found an entrance on their land often sealed it quickly, fearing misfortune. To open an Erdstelle, it was said, was to invite the old world back into the new, yet some communities treated them with respect, even reverence. A few churches in rural Styria and Lower Austria were built directly above tunnel systems, as if sanctifying something older beneath. Excavations beneath several chapels revealed entrances deliberately sealed with stone, not destroyed, preserved. Perhaps the builders of those churches recognized the tunnel's spiritual importance and chose to incorporate them into sacred ground rather than erase them. Geologists who have examined the tunnels agree that they were hand-carved, not natural caves. Their builders knew how to follow layers of soft sediment and avoid collapse. Many passages have stood intact for nearly 1,000 years. Some include shallow steps or benches cut into the stone, features unnecessary for hiding, but useful for ritual. A few chambers show signs of careful shaping into ovals or domes, architectural intention rather than random excavation. There is also a geographical pattern. The majority of Erdstelle lie in regions with strong prehistoric continuity, places where Bronze Age barrows, Iron Age hill forts, and Roman sites cluster within walking distance. It's as if each new era inherited a landscape already sacred. The medieval villagers may have rediscovered these ancient zones and redug or reused them for their own beliefs. If that's true, the Erdstelle are not isolated mysteries, but part of a chain of sacred landscapes stretching deep into prehistory. Standing inside one, you understand the effect they must have had. The air is cool, carrying the scent of damp clay. The walls close in until you must breathe carefully to move. Light falls away quickly. Within a few meters, the entrance disappears behind darkness. Every sound echoes. Your heartbeat becomes the only rhythm. Whether built for safety or ceremony, the experience itself transforms you. It forces stillness, humility, and awareness of the Earth's weight above. In 2018, researchers used laser scanning to map an uncollapsed network in Lower Austria. The digital model revealed something striking. The tunnel's geometry followed precise angles and arcs, not random burrowing. Each turn maintained consistent width and curvature, like a blueprint. This precision suggests either a shared knowledge among builders or a central tradition passed between communities. Who carried that knowledge? No one knows. There is no evidence of professional tunnelers in medieval Europe, yet the style of construction repeats from Bavaria to Ireland. Some scholars have speculated about monks or hermits, religious groups who may have built them as places of retreat. Others point to pre-Christian traditions, perhaps older even than the Middle Ages. The similarities across vast distances imply a network of ideas rather than isolated acts. As night falls in the European countryside, many of these tunnels lie silent beneath homes and farms. Their entrances are sealed, their purpose forgotten, yet they continue to draw curiosity. Archaeologists crawl through them with cameras and sensors. The pyramids of Guimar. Off the coast of North Africa, in the Atlantic Ocean, lies a small cluster of volcanic islands, the Canary Islands. Warm winds blow in from the Sahara, and the dark rock of long-extinct volcanoes glows red under the sun. On the island of Tenerife, at the edge of a quiet town called Guimar, there stands a site that has puzzled locals and scientists for more than a century. 6 stepped stone structures built from black volcanic rock, arranged in perfect geometric order. They are known today as the Pyramids of Guimar. To the casual visitor, they might look like ancient ruins, eroded by time. But the surfaces are sharp, the corners true, the steps aligned with the horizon. The structures rise from the middle of farmland, surrounded by stone walls and terraces. From above they form a pattern, a deliberate placement, not random piles of stone. Yet no one knows who built them, or when. For generations, the farmers of Guimar said the pyramids were nothing more than heaps of rock cleared from the fields. The soil here is thin, full of lava fragments. When settlers from Spain arrived in the 15th century, they would have stacked the stones into terraces to level the land for crops. It seemed simple enough. But when researchers began to study the structures in detail, that explanation began to unravel. The 6 main pyramids are built with care. Their stones are faced outward, creating smooth walls rather than rough heaps. Each step is evenly spaced, and the corners are carefully squared. Most striking of all, the entire complex is astronomically aligned. On the summer solstice, the sun sets directly along the western axis of the main pyramid, and at the same moment, a double sunset appears. The sun dips behind a mountain peak, rises again briefly, then finally disappears. On the winter solstice, the sunrise aligns precisely between 2 peaks on the opposite horizon. These are not the results of casual farming, they are the marks of intentional design. When Norwegian explorer Thor Heyerdahl, famous for the Kon-Tiki expedition, visited Tenerife in the early 1990s, he was captivated by what he saw. To him, the pyramids looked strikingly similar to structures in Peru, Mexico, and other parts of the ancient world. Heyerdahl proposed that the Canary Islands might have been a stopping point for early transoceanic travelers, perhaps even the link between ancient civilizations of Africa and the Americas. His idea was bold and controversial. According to Heyerdahl, the Guanches, the aboriginal people of the Canary Islands before the Spanish conquest, were not isolated tribes, but descendants of North African or even Mediterranean seafarers. Their legends told of gods who came from across the sea, of sacred mountains, and of mummified ancestors buried in caves. If these people built stepped pyramids, he reasoned, they might share origins with the builders of similar monuments elsewhere. Most archaeologists, however, have remained cautious. They note that the first written descriptions of the Guimar structures appear only in the 19th century, long after the Spanish colonization. That suggests the pyramids might be more recent, possibly the result of 18th or 19th century agricultural work. Yet the precision of their design, and the solstice alignment, continues to raise questions. The ethnographic park of Guimar, founded through Heyerdahl's research, preserves the site today. Visitors walking among the terraces can see that the stones are carefully fitted, their flat sides facing outward, their placement deliberate. The steps are shallow, wide enough for people to stand or sit, as if the builders intended the terraces to be climbed or used during ceremonies. Archaeological surveys have found pottery fragments and tools dating to the colonial period, but none directly associated with the first construction. The material evidence remains ambiguous. Yet the site's orientation toward solstitial events is unmistakable. When measured with modern instruments, the pyramid's long axes deviate by less than a degree from true astronomical lines. This level of precision would require observation, planning, and knowledge of the sun's annual path. The question then becomes not just when they were built, but why? Why would 19th century farmers take the time to align agricultural terraces to the solstice? And why build 6 of them, identical in form, when simple walls would have sufficed? Some historians point to Freemasonry, which was active in Tenerife during the 1800s. Masonic symbolism often incorporated solar alignments, geometric design, and the idea of spiritual ascent. It is possible that wealthy landowners who were members of such societies commissioned the pyramids for ritual or symbolic purposes, using agricultural labor to mask their intent. Others believe the pyramids may have had a more practical origin that was later ritualized. Structures that began as terraces, but were elevated into monuments over generations. Still others return to Heyerdahl's vision that the Canary Islands were once a crossroads of ancient seafarers, a stepping stone between continents. The island's location, almost exactly between Europe, Africa, and the Americas, makes that idea tempting. Ancient Egyptian, Phoenician, and Berber sailors all navigated these waters. Perhaps one group left behind a tradition of stepped stone construction that the Guanches preserved long after contact was lost. Modern geological analysis shows that the stones used to build the pyramids were gathered from local lava flows, not carved blocks. Each piece was chosen for shape and stability, fitted like a natural puzzle. This technique, common in prehistoric and early agricultural societies, required deep familiarity with the landscape. The builders understood how to balance weight, slope, and drainage, the same skills used in constructing long-lasting terraces and temples across ancient regions. The environment around Guimar adds its own symbolism. The pyramids face Mount Teide, the volcano that dominates Tenerife and was considered sacred by the Guanches. They called it Etchiide, the home of the gods and the gateway to the underworld. Aligning the pyramids toward Tida and the solstices may have joined Earth, Sun, and Mountain into a single cosmological design. In that view, the site was not merely functional, but spiritual, a calendar of light tied to the divine landscape. Standing at the top of the main pyramid at sunset, you see the Atlantic stretching westward in a wide band of silver. The air smells of salt and dry grass. The sun drops slowly toward the ocean, its last light sliding along the line of stones until it touches the edge of Mount Tida. The alignment is perfect. Even if built in recent centuries, the experience feels ancient. You sense what every civilization before has known, that the movement of the sun defines not just time but existence itself. For the people who built Gudimar, whoever they were, that truth may have been enough. The pyramids did not need to hold tombs or treasure. Their purpose could have been simpler, to connect the human world with the rhythm of the heavens. The ghostly statues of Ain Ghazal. In the heart of modern-day Amman, Jordan, there once lay a quiet stream that fed a green valley, a place the ancients called Ain Ghazal, the spring of the gazelle. Today it is surrounded by highways and apartment blocks, but beneath the dust and concrete lies one of the most mysterious archaeological discoveries ever made. A collection of statues unlike anything else in the ancient world. They are tall, white, hollow-eyed figures made of plaster and reed, the oldest known life-sized human statues on Earth. To stand before them is to feel the echo of a world older than cities, older than kings, a world just beginning to understand what it meant to be human. The story begins in 1983, when construction workers on the outskirts of Amman stumbled upon a strange layer of white fragments buried in the soil. Archaeologists were called in, expecting pottery or bones from a Bronze Age village. What they uncovered instead stopped them in their tracks. Layer by layer, they revealed human-like forms, torsos, heads, limbs, all molded from plaster over a framework of bundled reeds. Some were full-bodied statues, others busts, some with two faces. Their eyes were outlined with bitumen, their pupils dark and staring. Their mouths were faint lines, neither smiling nor frowning. They looked almost alive, and yet not human. When they were first lifted from the ground, many were so fragile that they cracked under their own weight. The archaeologist realized they were dealing with something extraordinary, not art in the modern sense, but a sacred technology, a way of preserving presence. Radiocarbon dating placed them at around 9,000 years old, from about 6500 BCE, deep in the Neolithic era, long before writing, metal, or the wheel. This was the time when the first farmers were beginning to settle in permanent villages, taming the land and domesticating animals. Ain Ghazal was one of those early communities, but its people were doing something no one else in the world seemed to be doing, creating human images at life size, using nothing but earth, water, and fire. More than 30 statues were eventually found, buried in 2 large pits. They were carefully placed, not broken or discarded. Each pit had been filled and sealed with care, as if performing a ritual. The statues were not random in form. They followed patterns, some male, some female, others ambiguous. Their arms were thin and folded, their bodies smooth and featureless, except for small raised areas for the breasts or shoulders. The heads were large and oval, the faces symmetrical, the eyes wide and blank. Their expressions, if they can be called that, are distant, calm, and unsettling. It is as if they were meant to embody both life and death, presence and absence. Archaeologists now believe these figures were created by the people of the pre-pottery Neolithic B period, one of the earliest settled farming cultures in the Near East. The people of Ain Ghazal lived in rectangular mud brick houses with plastered floors. They cultivated barley, lentils, and chickpeas, and herded goats. But their world was not merely practical, it was deeply spiritual, built around cycles of fertility, ancestry, and renewal. The statues seem to have been part of that spiritual system, objects not of worship but of memory. When the statues were analyzed, researchers found that their outer plaster contained a mix of burnt limestone and gypsum, the same materials used to coat the floors of houses. But in the statues, the craftsmanship was far more refined. Layers of plaster had been applied with care, polished smooth and painted white. The process required fire hot enough to calcine limestone, over 600 degrees Celsius, and precise timing to prevent cracking. This level of control shows a mastery of chemistry and design, long before the invention of metal tools. It also shows intention. These were not idols made in haste, they were engineered. The use of reeds inside each statue gave them lightness and shape, much like bones. Some statues even have traces of hair-like impressions, suggesting the artists tried to represent real people. Yet they are not portraits. Each one is slightly abstracted, simplified, and idealized, more like archetypes than individuals. When they were buried, the villagers seem to have done so deliberately, almost ceremonially. The 2 pits where they were found were dug at different times, centuries apart, but the ritual was the same. The figures were arranged facing upward, as if sleeping, no evidence of destruction, no signs of neglect. They were interred like ancestors. This has led some archaeologists to suggest that the statues may represent the spirits of the dead, perhaps elders or leaders, whose memory the community sought to preserve. In many ancient cultures, plastered human skulls have been found, particularly in Jericho and other Neolithic sites of the Levant. The skulls were often decorated with plaster faces and shell eyes, then buried beneath house floors. The statues of Ain Ghazal seem to extend that same belief, but on a larger scale, taking the image of the ancestor from beneath the ground and giving it full form, visible to the living. But why were they buried again? Perhaps their power was temporary, meant for a single ritual cycle: birth, death, renewal. Once their purpose was fulfilled, they were returned to the earth, sealed, and left to rest. In that sense, the statues may not depict individuals at all, but rather humanity itself, the eternal ancestors of everyone who would follow. Standing in front of them today, preserved in climate-controlled museum rooms, their stillness is haunting. The faces seem both familiar and alien, like distant relatives seen through a dream. The plaster surface catches light softly, emphasizing the hollows of the eyes, the curve of the skull, the thin lines of the mouth. There is no expression to interpret, only a sense of watching, or being watched. To look into those eyes is to see something of ourselves, the earliest attempt to make the invisible visible, to give the idea of human a permanent form. It's a bridge between the world of spirit and the world of matter, and it forces a question that has no easy answer. Why did the people of Ain Ghazal feel the need to build these figures at all? They had no temples, no written language, no kings, yet they invested enormous effort into shaping life-sized representations of themselves. What were they trying to say? Some researchers think the answer lies in the transition from a nomadic to a settled life. When humans began to stay in one place, they also began to think about continuity, about lineage, land, and belonging. The statues might represent that moment, the birth of identity, the first physical expression of us. Others believe the figures reflect a deeper belief in the connection between body and spirit, a realization that what is human is both material and immortal. Either way, Ain Ghazal marks a threshold in human history. These statues are not art in the modern sense, they are consciousness made visible. For the first time, humanity looked at itself and tried to capture what it saw. The Pazyryk carpet of Siberia. High in the frozen valleys of the Altai Mountains, where Russia, Mongolia, and Kazakhstan meet, lies one of the most extraordinary discoveries ever pulled from the ice. A single object, small enough to carry, yet vast enough to change our understanding of ancient civilization. It is not a weapon, or a statue, or a relic of gold. It is a carpet, woven wool and dyed thread, found preserved in the permafrost of a burial mound more than 2,000 years old. It is called the Pazyryk carpet, and it is the oldest known carpet in the world. But to describe it simply as old is to miss its wonder entirely. The moment it was unrolled from the ice in 1949, archaeologists were stunned. The design was intricate, symmetrical, and alive with detail. Patterns of riders, deer, and flowers woven so finely that even modern weavers would struggle to match it. The Pazyryk carpet was discovered by a Soviet expedition led by Sergei Rudenko, who had been excavating a series of ancient burial mounds in the Altai known as kurgans. These mounds belonged to a nomadic people called the Pazyryk culture, who lived in the region around the 5th century BCE. For centuries, the kurgans had stood untouched in the high, cold valleys, sealed by layers of frozen soil. When the archaeologists broke through the ice, they expected to find bones, weapons, perhaps a few bronze ornaments. What they found instead was an entire burial chamber, frozen in time. Inside lay a nobleman, possibly a chieftain, surrounded by the objects of his life and death: a chariot, horses, armor, saddles, and embroidered fabrics. But at the foot of the burial platform was something that none of them expected: a roll of cloth, perfectly preserved, its colors still vivid under the frost. When they unwrapped it, they realized it was a carpet, and not just any carpet, but one of incredible artistry. Radiocarbon dating placed it at about 400–500 BCE, which meant it was over 2,400 years old. Yet it looked as though it could have been made yesterday. The weave was dense, more than 3,600 knots per square inch, a level of craftsmanship that even today is considered a mark of mastery. The colors, deep reds, soft golds, and rich blues, had survived the millennia, protected by the ice. The design itself told a story. The central field of the carpet was filled with a repeating pattern of rosettes, surrounded by intricate borders. Along the outer edge, two striking friezes ran in parallel, one showing a procession of horses and riders, the other a line of deer with long, elegant antlers. Each figure was unique, carefully drawn with astonishing realism. You could see the harnesses on the horses, the folds of the riders' cloaks, the curve of the deer's legs. Whoever made this carpet was not only a skilled artisan, but also an observer of life. Someone who understood the movement of animals, the dignity of ceremony, the language of beauty. The mystery of the Pazyryk carpet is not only how it survived, but how it was made at all. The people of the Altai were nomads, moving seasonally across the steppe. They left few permanent structures, no cities or temples. And yet, in their frozen tombs, archaeologists found objects of sophistication rivaling those of Persia, China, and Greece. The carpet's design, in fact, bears clear similarities to Achaemenid Persian art, particularly the depictions of horses and the floral motifs. Some scholars believe it was woven in Persia and traded north, along the early Silk Road. Others argue it was made locally by the Pazyryk people themselves, proving that even in the remote steppes, artistic and cultural refinement flourished. The burial where it was found, Kurgan No. 5 in the Pazyryk Valley, held more than just the carpet. The noble buried there was accompanied by his horses, each one sacrificed and adorned with elaborate saddles and bridles. The chamber walls were lined with wooden beams, and on them hung felt panels embroidered with scenes of warriors and griffins. There were wooden furniture pieces, bronze mirrors, and even tattooed human remains, their skins still bearing intricate swirling patterns of animals and mythic beasts. The carpet, lying near the foot of the coffin, was more than decoration. It was symbolic. In many ancient cultures, the weaving of fabric represented the weaving of life itself, the interlacing of fate and spirit. A carpet was not just an object, it was a cosmos, a world woven into being by human hands. To be buried with one was to be given safe passage through the afterlife. Under a microscope, the Pazyryk carpet reveals astonishing detail. The knots are of the symmetrical Giords type, a technique still used today in Persian and Turkish carpets. The wool is fine, likely from domesticated sheep, specially bred for their soft undercoat. Natural dyes derived from plants and insects were used to produce the rich palette, madder for red, indigo for blue, and perhaps saffron or pomegranate for yellow. Every step of its making required skill and time, the kind of dedication given to an object of reverence. For decades, the carpet has been kept at the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg, preserved under glass in a dimly lit room. Visitors who stand before it often fall silent. It has a strange gravity, not because of its age, but because of its humanity. It represents a world where art and survival were not separate, where even the nomads of the cold steppe sought beauty that would outlive them. When you look closely, you can almost imagine the loom, the weaver sitting cross-legged beside a fire in a felt tent, hands moving rhythmically, knot by knot. Outside, snow falls over the mountains. Horses breathe in the cold, their saddles glinting with bronze. Inside, the weaver's fingers trace stories of animals and people, turning thread into life. The discovery of the Pazyryk carpet challenged the idea that civilization and art belong only to the great river valleys, Mesopotamia, Egypt, China. It showed that beauty can emerge anywhere humans live, even in a place of ice and wind. The Pazyryk people may have been nomads, but their culture was not primitive. They traded across vast distances, carried complex ideas of ritual and design, and honored their dead with care. Every knot in that carpet is a link, between worlds, between hands, between moments of time. And when the archaeologists brushed away the last layer of frost in 1949, they weren't just uncovering a textile, they were uncovering a voice. A whisper from 2,500 years ago that said, "We were here. We saw beauty too." The submerged circles of Lake Michigan. Beneath the cold, green waters of Lake Michigan, a few miles from the coast of Traverse Bay, something strange rests on the lakebed. At first glance, it looks like a cluster of ordinary boulders scattered across the sand. But as sonar scans traced the outlines more clearly, patterns began to emerge. A ring of stones forming a near-perfect circle, 30 feet wide, sitting in the still depths of the Great Lake. It looked impossibly deliberate. The discovery came in 2007, when a team of researchers led by Professor Mark Hawley, a marine archaeologist from Northwestern Michigan College, was mapping the lake floor using sonar technology. Their goal was simple: to survey the bottom for shipwrecks, debris, and geological formations. What they found instead was something that didn't fit any known explanation, a stone arrangement that seemed too organized to be natural. The sonar image showed 12 large rocks forming a circle, with several smaller stones scattered inside. At first, the team thought it might be a natural glacial deposit, remnants from when retreating ice sheets dropped boulders across the Great Lakes thousands of years ago. But as the divers descended to confirm the find, they realized this was no random scattering. The stones were evenly spaced, many roughly similar in size, and placed with a precision rarely seen in natural formations. And then came the detail that turned a curiosity into a mystery. On one of the larger stones, about a meter across, was an image, a carved outline resembling the body of a mastodon, the long-extinct ancestor of the elephant that roamed North America over 10,000 years ago. The carving was faint but visible: the arched back, the long curved tusks, the trunk extending downward. It was unmistakable. If the carving was truly ancient, if it was made when mastodons still walked the land, then the site was older than the Great Pyramids of Egypt, older than Stonehenge, and older than written history itself. It would date back to the end of the Ice Age, to a time when the Great Lakes weren't lakes at all, but vast plains of grass and forest. At that time, around 10,000 BCE, the glaciers were retreating northward, and what is now Lake Michigan was a cold, shallow basin fed by meltwater. Early hunter-gatherer peoples moved through the region, following herds of mammoth, caribou, and mastodon. Archaeologists know these Paleo-Indian cultures built temporary camps, used stone tools, and occasionally arranged rocks for hunting or ceremonial purposes. But nothing on the scale of a stone circle has ever been confirmed. Not in North America, and certainly not beneath a lake. The divers recorded the site carefully, photographing every stone and measuring their positions. The circle sits about 12 meters 40 feet below the surface, in water cold enough to preserve it for thousands of years. The visibility is poor, just a few feet, but in the stillness of the lakebed, the stones stand quietly, their shapes softened by silt. Some are partially buried, others sit proud, like sentinels watching a lost world. When the discovery was announced, the media quickly dubbed it the Stonehenge of Lake Michigan. The name caught attention but also skepticism. Scientists were cautious. Could it really be ancient? Or was it a coincidence, the result of glacial movement, or more recent human activity? Hawley and his team were careful in their statements. They noted that the site's geometry seemed deliberate, but without excavation and carbon dating of surrounding material, its true age couldn't be confirmed. The carved mastodon image added intrigue, but some experts suggested it could be a natural erosion pattern or a modern marking mistaken for art. Underwater visibility and algae growth made it difficult to study in detail. Still, the location matched something compelling: the shoreline of an ancient dry plain that existed when lake levels were much lower, around 9,000 years ago. Geological reconstructions show that the area would have been dry land, possibly part of a hunting corridor used by Ice Age peoples. If those hunters marked a successful hunt by arranging stones or carving an image of their prey, it would make sense for such a site to exist here. In many parts of the world, early societies built stone circles as gathering or ritual sites, from the megaliths of Europe to the medicine wheels of North America's plains. Could this be a forgotten example, later submerged as glaciers melted and waters rose? The possibility is tantalizing. When divers returned for additional surveys, they found that the stones rested on a hard clay layer rather than loose sediment, meaning they had likely been stable since before the lake's formation. That suggests the circle predates the modern lake by thousands of years. Beneath the stones, sonar indicated another feature, a subtle raised ridge, almost like an earthen embankment, hidden under the silt. It may be natural, or it may be the remains of an artificial platform. For scientists, the biggest challenge is access. The site lies in an area of strong underwater currents and low visibility, making extended excavation difficult. Legal protections on submerged archaeological sites also limit disturbance without full environmental review. For now, the stones remain where they were found, quietly resting, guarded by water and time. Those who have dived there describe an eerie calm. The light from above fades quickly. Within a few meters, it becomes green and shadowed. The stones appear slowly out of the gloom, massive and still. When divers turn off their lights, the world narrows to sound, the gentle hiss of air, the slow beating of their own hearts. In that silence, it's easy to imagine the world as it once was. Forests stretching across the horizon, herds moving through snow, and small bands of humans marking a sacred place on the ground. Could these stones have been part of a hunting drive, a formation used to guide animals toward a kill zone, similar to the ancient drive lanes found in other Ice Age sites? Or were they symbolic, built to honor the spirits of the animals they hunted? Both theories fit with what we know of early humans. The circles may not have been monuments of worship, but tools of survival and memory. And then there is the carving. The supposed mastodon figure continues to divide experts. Some dismiss it as pareidolia, the human tendency to see patterns where none exist. Others point to its proportions, its symmetry, and its match to actual Paleolithic petroglyphs found elsewhere in North America. If genuine, it would mean that an artist, 10,000 years ago, knelt beside the stone and recorded a scene from life, one of the last moments of an animal that would soon vanish from the earth. Whether coincidence or creation, the image has power. It reminds us that the boundary between nature and design, between geology and intention, is often thin. Sometimes, what begins as simple stones becomes a mirror for our imagination, a reflection of how we seek meaning in what endures. Today, the Lake Michigan Stone Circle remains one of the most enigmatic underwater sites on the continent. There are no signs, no barriers, no museum exhibits, just coordinates, photographs, and a handful of sonar scans. Yet its presence challenges the idea that ancient America was empty, untouched, or unaware. Long before pyramids rose or cities were planned, People here were already shaping their world, marking time, memory, and the passage of the wild. The Roman dodecahedrons, tools, toys, or something else. Across the old lands of the Roman Empire, in fields, in riverbeds, in the ruins of villas and forts, archaeologists keep finding the same strange object. A small bronze shape, no bigger than a fist. 12 flat faces, each with a circular hole in the center, all connected by edges that end in small knobs. Perfect geometry, no markings, no instructions, just a hollow, silent form. More than 100 of these mysterious objects have been found across Europe, from England to Hungary, from France to Italy. They are known as Roman dodecahedrons, and despite 2 centuries of study, no one knows what they were for. They date from roughly the 2nd to 4th century CE, a time when Rome ruled much of the known world. Yet the empire's vast archives, its literature, inventories, and art, make no mention of them. The Romans wrote about everything: taxes, tools, gods, and games, but not these. The dodecahedrons exist in silence, as if they were never meant to be explained. Each one is unique. Some are smooth, others decorated with fine ridges or patterns. The holes in their faces vary in size, and no 2 objects share the same dimensions exactly. They were cast from bronze using precise molds, the kind used for fine instruments or ritual items. Their craftsmanship is too deliberate to be trivial. When the first examples were unearthed in the 18th century, scholars thought they might be candlestick holders, the holes allowing light to flicker through. But when replicas were tested, wax dripped unevenly, and the objects grew too hot to hold. Others suggested they were measuring tools, possibly used to calculate distances or sizes. The holes arranged by diameter could have allowed a surveyor to estimate the width of pipes or the size of projectiles. But again, no ancient manual describes such a device. Then came the military theory. Some believed the dodecahedrons were part of Roman rangefinders, instruments used to gauge distance for archers. If you looked through 2 opposite holes, each of a different size, you could align a target within a specific visual angle and estimate its distance by simple geometry. The idea is elegant, and experiments with 3D printed replicas show it could work. But there's no consistent scale across the artifacts. The holes vary too widely. If they were instruments, they were not standardized, and the Roman army, known for its precision, would not have tolerated inconsistency. Another possibility is religious. Many dodecahedrons were found in what appear to be ritual contexts, near temples, tombs, or places of offering. Some were discovered alongside coins and ceramics that suggest votive deposits. The 12 sides could represent the 12 signs of the zodiac, the months of the year, or the 12 main gods of Rome. The holes could have held crystals or colored stones, turning the object into a kind of miniature cosmological model, a handheld universe. There's also the textile theory, which emerged only recently. Some archaeologists noticed that the holes could correspond to knitting gauges, allowing the creation of woolen gloves with uniform finger sizes. In northern Roman provinces, such as Gaul and Britain, dodecahedrons are far more common, precisely the regions where cold winters required knitted clothing. Experiments using replicas have shown that the object can indeed produce perfectly fitting gloves. Yet this idea too faces a problem: the cost. These devices are made of bronze, an expensive material, and their distribution suggests ceremonial, not domestic use. The truth may lie somewhere between all these theories. The dodecahedron might have been a tool, but also a symbol, an object that merged function with belief. The Romans often blurred the line between the practical and the sacred. A soldier's sword, a farmer's plow, a merchant's scale, all could be objects of ritual meaning. The shape itself carries power. The dodecahedron is one of the Platonic solids, a form that fascinated philosophers for millennia. To the Greeks, it represented the cosmos, the harmony of the heavens, the 5th element beyond earth, air, fire, and water. When Plato wrote of the universe being shaped like a dodecahedron, he meant it as a symbol of perfection and order. The Romans inherited that idea through philosophy and geometry. Perhaps these small bronzes were built as tangible expressions of that cosmic form, tokens of balance, of knowledge, made metal. Yet their presence across so wide an area complicates things. Some have been found in Roman villas, others in military camps, still others in remote rural settlements. None bear inscriptions, none are decorated with scenes of myth or gods. It's as if their meaning was universal, understood without words. The first time you see one in person, it feels oddly modern. The symmetry, the clean lines, the way light moves through its holes. It could be a piece of modern sculpture, and maybe that's part of the fascination. It looks both ancient and futuristic, both familiar and alien. In museums, they often sit in glass cases, unassuming, next to coins or pottery. Visitors pass by without realizing they're looking at one of archaeology's unsolved riddles. Each time a new dodecahedron is found, it deepens the mystery. The materials and craftsmanship match the Roman period perfectly. The London hammer, a tool trapped in stone. It was a warm summer day in June 1936, when a couple named Max and Emma Hahn were hiking near the small town of London, Texas. A quiet place surrounded by rolling hills, cedar trees, and the slow bends of the Paluxy River. While walking along a rocky ledge, Emma noticed something odd jutting out from a slab of stone, a piece of wood, weathered and dark, encased in rock. She called her husband over. When Max struck the stone open with a hammer, what he found would ignite one of the most enduring mysteries in modern archaeology. Inside the rock was an object that looked unmistakably man-made, a hammer, its head made of iron, its handle of wood, still partly embedded in the ancient stone. It was simple in design, nothing ornate, just a tool. But the problem wasn't what it was. The problem was where it was found. The rock encasing the hammer appeared to belong to a geologic formation that was more than 100 million years old. A human-made hammer sealed inside rock from the Cretaceous period, a time when dinosaurs still roamed the earth. If true, it would be impossible. Over the next several decades, the London hammer, as it came to be known, would become one of the most debated artifacts ever discovered. To some, it was proof that human civilization was far older than history admits, perhaps a relic from a forgotten age, or evidence of time out of place. To others, it was a modern tool that somehow became encased in recent stone through natural processes. Between those two ideas, deep mystery and simple explanation, lies the entire fascination of the object. The hammer itself is small, about 6 inches long, with a head weighing roughly 340 grams, around 3/4 of a pound. The head is made of iron, and a small amount of chlorine, an unusual combination, suggesting it was smelted using techniques that don't align with modern industrial methods. The handle, partially fossilized, is made of wood, mostly turned to coal. When examined under laboratory conditions, the iron showed no signs of oxidation, no rust, despite being exposed to air for decades. At first glance, the hammer looks ordinary, like something a craftsman might have used in the 1800s, but when researchers examined the stone around it, the story grew stranger. The rock was a type of Cretaceous limestone concretion, estimated by geologists to date between 100 and 115 million years old, long before humans existed. How could such an object end up inside such ancient rock? In the 1980s, creationist researchers seized upon the find as evidence against conventional geology, a so-called out-of-place artifact, or OOP art. They argued that either human civilization extends back tens of millions of years, or that the conventional timeline of Earth's history is flawed. The London hammer, they said, was proof that modern science had missed something fundamental about the story of life on this planet. Skeptics countered with a simpler explanation, that the hammer was not ancient at all, but rather a 19th century tool that had become encased in a concretion, a mass of mineralized material that forms when dissolved minerals in water precipitate around an object. Over time, such concretions can harden, giving the appearance of great age. In other words, the rock wasn't 100 million years old when the hammer entered it. It was formed around the hammer recently, perhaps only a few hundred years ago, but even that explanation leaves questions. The concretion surrounding the hammer is remarkably uniform, dense, and tightly bonded to the wood and metal. It would take a very specific set of conditions for minerals to harden that completely around an object, sealing it as if it were fossilized. The site where it was found, a limestone outcrop along the Paluxy River, is known for its ancient fossils, including dinosaur tracks. That means the environment is one where geological and organic materials mingle easily across vast timescales. When photographs of the hammer first circulated in the mid-20th century, public imagination caught fire. Newspapers called it the 100-million-year-old tool. It was displayed at small-town fairs, church gatherings, and later, in the Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas. Visitors could look at it through glass, the iron still gleaming, the stone still gripping the handle, and feel that deep, thrilling uncertainty that comes when science meets mystery. What made the artifact so compelling wasn't just the physical object itself, but what it represented. The possibility that history is not a straight line, but a circle, that the past may hide echoes of civilizations long forgotten. But let's step back from the sensationalism and look closely at the evidence. The wooden handle has been tested multiple times. In one analysis, part of the wood was found to have partially turned to coal, suggesting it had been buried in mineral-rich sediment under pressure. However, this process can occur in centuries rather than millions of years if the conditions are right. Other studies of the iron showed that it had an unusually high purity, around 96%, with a small amount of chlorine present. This chlorine could indicate that the metal had been smelted in an environment lacking oxygen, producing a form of corrosion resistance. The technology to smelt such pure iron without modern furnaces didn't exist in the 1800s, but that doesn't necessarily mean it was ancient. There are natural processes, including low-oxygen water chemistry, that can affect the composition of buried iron over time. Yet, the hammer's exact metallurgical makeup remains puzzling. When examined under X-ray fluorescence, the surface displayed no rust, even after decades of exposure. That's extremely unusual for iron left in open air. So we are left with two possibilities, each unsatisfying in its own way. Either this is a modern hammer, somehow embedded in an ancient concretine, or it truly is a relic from an impossibly distant past. If the latter were true, if the London hammer really is millions of years old, it would rewrite everything we know about human history. It would mean that intelligent beings, capable of metallurgy and tool-making, existed during the time of dinosaurs. There are no fossils, no settlements, no other artifacts to support that idea. But the hammer, sitting there under glass, keeps that question alive. What makes the story endure is not just the science, but the aura of the object. The Quimbaya airplanes of Colombia. In the humid valleys of central Colombia, where the Magdalena River winds through mountains thick with jungle and mist, gold once defined an entire world. Long before the Spanish arrived, the Quimbaya civilization flourished here. Master goldsmiths, whose work shimmered with both beauty and mystery. Their artifacts, shaped from gold-copper alloy called tumbaga, still gleam today in museum glass. Yet among their treasures lies a handful of objects that defy easy explanation. Each is small enough to fit in a palm, sleek, symmetrical figures made more than 1,000 years ago. They resemble birds or fish at first glance, but their forms carry something uncannily familiar to modern eyes. Delta-shaped wings, tail stabilizers, upright fins, even what looks like a cockpit canopy. They have become known as the Quimbaya airplanes. Archaeologists classify them as zoomorphic pendants, miniatures of creatures sacred to the Quimbaya people, but others have looked at the same gold figures and seen something very different. Machines that should not exist in the pre-Columbian world. The Quimbaya culture reached its height between the 4th and 10th centuries CE, centered in what is now Colombia's Quindío region. They left behind no written language, only the shapes of their art, vessels, ornaments, funerary masks, and tiny castings of animals both real and imagined. Gold was more than a symbol of wealth. It was a spiritual metal, the skin of the sun, a bridge between worlds. Objects of gold were not meant for use, but for offering. Buried with the dead or left in caves to honor gods. When Spanish explorers uncovered tombs centuries later, they found caches of Quimbaya gold, necklaces, figurines, and the curious aerodynamic shapes that would spark debate. Some of these artifacts now rest in Bogotá's Museo del Oro, the Museum of Gold, displayed quietly among hundreds of other ancient works. To stand before the glass and see them up close is startling. The pieces are only a few centimeters long, yet their proportions mirror those of modern aircraft. A few have swept wings, others possess vertical tails and pointed noses. None resemble known birds, insects, or fish native to Colombia. Their smooth undersides and angled planes appear engineered, not organic. In the 1950s and 60s, as aviation transformed human imagination, these little gold objects found new fame. Writers and engineers began calling them ancient airplanes. Photographs circulated in popular magazines, often accompanied by bold claims that the Quimbaya people had witnessed flight or inherited knowledge from visitors beyond Earth. It was a thrilling idea that our ancestors might have known the sky long before the Wright brothers, but to archaeologists, such claims blurred the line between wonder and invention. The Quimbaya, they argued, lived close to nature. Birds and insects held deep mythic power. The act of flight represented spiritual ascent. Many pendants depict creatures stylized beyond recognition, combinations of wings, fins, and tails that symbolized transformation between water, land, and air. The airplanes in that view were totemic creatures, not mechanical ones. Still, the resemblance is hard to ignore. In 1994, two German engineers, Peter Belting and Konrad Lübers, built scaled-up models of several Quimbaya artifacts, keeping proportions exact. They fitted the replicas with propellers and radio controls, and to their surprise, the models flew. The designs were aerodynamically stable. When wind tunnel tested, the shapes produced lift consistent with fixed-wing flight. To some, this was confirmation that the resemblance was more than coincidence. Skeptics countered that almost any symmetrical, tapered form will fly when scaled up and powered. The question, they said, wasn't whether the shape could fly, it was whether the Quimbaya meant it to. Archaeological context offered clues. Many airplane pendants were found alongside zoomorphic figures, clearly representing bats, birds, and insects. Within that continuum, the so-called airplanes were simply another artistic variation, abstractions rather than anomalies. The truth may lie somewhere between. The Quimbaya may not have known flight in the modern sense, but they certainly observed it with intensity. Their world was filled with creatures that soared, glided, and dived, symbols of freedom and transcendence. By casting those shapes in gold, they captured the essence of motion itself, a physics of the spirit, not of machines. Technically, the craftsmanship is exquisite. Each pendant was cast by the lost wax method, The artist shaped a model in wax, encased it in clay, and fired it until the wax melted away, leaving a hollow mold to be filled with molten tembaga. After cooling, the clay was broken, revealing the gleaming figure inside. No two were identical. The process demanded precision and intuition, a mastery of temperature and timing. To achieve symmetry in pieces this small suggests not primitive tinkering, but advanced metallurgical knowledge. When metallurgists studied Quimbaya gold, they found deliberate alloying ratios, around 30% copper to 70% gold, which lowered the melting point and made the metal more durable. Such control points to a long tradition of experimentation. The Quimbaya goldsmiths were scientists in their own way, reading flame and metal instead of equations. If these figures truly were symbolic, their meaning was layered. Some scholars believe they depict flying fish or beetles, creatures that move through both water and air, the ultimate embodiment of transformation. Others suggest they were ornaments for shamanic rituals, representing the shaman's spirit flight during trance. In that interpretation, the gold airplanes were not depictions of machines, but metaphors for the human soul's ability to rise beyond the body. Yet the mind resists closure. To modern eyes, shaped by centuries of engineering, those same forms awaken different associations. The nose cones, the delta wings, the stabilizers, they whisper of flight, of technology, of knowledge misplaced or rediscovered, and perhaps that reaction itself is part of the mystery.